But nobody will give incest a platform for victims to speak out on. If I'd have given up fighting for justice, my dad would still be free to rape other children, and that's what the police were allowing to happen. Who was in that ring?
That's the question.
There's ring.
Where's the victims? Why were my dad protected for 35 years when there were enough evidence to arrest an army of paedophiles?
Yeah.
You're dealing with a little boy in long trousers. Whatever you say black, he will say white, and whatever you've got kids to, he'll make your life hell. If this goes to court, your name will be blackened and dragged through the mud, and you'll be made out to be the biggest liar and slag going. Can you handle it?
Cover his.
He said, if I go down, I'm going to take 20 down with me. I've been a bastard in my time, he says, but not like your dad. Your dad is a bastard, and I believe he's a very bad man, and I've got the recording of that. It was that little girl inside me, finally. She got what she wanted, but she didn't want that, really. She didn't want to be taking her dad to court, having 9 hours of surgery, still climbing to the summit 8 months after without any insurance. I turned chemotherapy down.
Wow.
Morning, fellas. Welcome back to the Fine and Dandy podcast.
The podcast where two fellas usually catch up, sup up, and all that jazz, but not today. As you can probably tell by his location, we're back where we bring the guests in. So tonight we've got a special guest, Andrew. Fill us in a bit more.
Today we've got Carol Higgins on the podcast. Carol, this is the point of the podcast where we usually sum up the guests a little bit, maybe tell them about the achievements, what they've been through in life, but you've obviously got quite a raw story, and I don't want to do it any injustice by summing it up myself, so I will throw it over to you. Carol, welcome to the podcast. Introduce yourself.
Hey up, lads.
How are you doing?
It's nice to be here.
It's
Yeah, thanks
lovely
for
to
coming
have
on.
you.
I'm doing all right, thank you. It's nice to be invited onto your show.
It's lovely to have you. So we'd like to start off, Carol, by asking you, what will people know you from? Where will the people have seen you? We obviously found you on the news from getting your father to prison after 37 years of abuse. Mm-hmm. So I guess kind of where do we start with you?
I think we'll start in my childhood and where I grew up, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I grew up in a village called Denbydale.
Yep.
I call myself a Barnsley lass because it was
Good.
only 8 miles from Barnsley.
Absolutely.
Love it. We're Barnsley lads, as we know.
Straight John Bull, high up.
Oh, God, yeah.
Absolutely.
What's that? How would you say? I know some clog iron. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
Is that I think it's about knowing some knowledge, but I don't even know that. I know enough about
First
that.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
I'm a Barnsley lad, so.
Yeah, I've not heard that one for a long time.
I know, yeah, it's absolute classic.
Yeah. But straight John Bull is when you want people just to be straight John and speak to you truthfully and honestly, and that's not what I've had for the biggest part of my life.
Very true, yeah.
A lot of cover-ups, so
Yeah.
it's been quite frustrating for me getting my voice heard. So as a child growing up in Denbydale, I grew up in a house of extreme violence.
Yep.
I had 2 siblings. My brother, he was a year younger than me, Paul, and my sister, she was a year older than me, and she had out of control grand mal epileptic seizures and brain damage, and from the polio vaccine.
Right.
And then I had parents who did a lot of shouting, very angry parents, like beaters with leather belts and wooden spoons and slippers. Both of them were violent towards us, made us do all the, a lot of the chores, the housework and work on my dad's land and things like that. So getting an education was really hard for me. And because of the trauma of the abuse, being beaten a lot, I couldn't really learn at school. And then when I got to age 12, my dad started kissing me properly, kissing me on the lips like I was his girlfriend. He used to take me out for walks all the time, and looking for scrap metal that he used to do. Also, we used to break into skips, and the things that we used to find, we either used to use to clothe ourselves with, or furnish the house, or sell things on the Barnsley flea market and things like that. And then one day he took me out when I was 12, the first time he kissed me, and he shot my dog in front of me, my dog Sam.
That's insane. It's so far detached from anything that I would ever experience. I can't believe that you've had to go through that. Just to quickly recap there, you said you used to go out and find scrap metal and stuff. Was that you and your dad that?
Yeah.
So he took you with him?
Yeah, and my brother used to come a lot, but then it got where my dad stopped asking our Paul to go with him, and he would just started asking me.
Almost like to separate you.
Yeah, and so that he'd get me on his own.
And I think I heard in the podcast that you did with Sean that sort of your brother obviously didn't know what was going on properly, so he sort of, would you say, were a bit jealous as to like, well, I think you said at one point he came over to him like, Carol, Dad wants you, you know, as in like, oh, he's taking you out and he's not taking me out. Is that how it sort of come across to your brother in the early stages?
Well, my brother, you know, couldn't understand why my dad wasn't, because like to Paul, his dad was his hero.
Yeah.
And he couldn't understand. But what you're referring to is like if I was up the village or in the rec, on the estate where we had a park, we called it a rec.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad, if he knew I were playing out with friends, our Paul would come up and say, "My father wants you now." And like I'd be frightened because when my dad, I didn't realise that were part of the grooming, that he didn't want me to like be playing with other people or like
specifically the boys, probably.
Exactly, the boys, yes, specifically.
Because he saw you as a girlfriend. Is that
well,
would that be right?
He told me on one of these walks that he called me Carol. They named me Carol as a baby after one of his girlfriends. So he knew from birth that he were going to groom me, but I didn't actually start piecing all this together until I got a lot older.
Wow.
So,
and because he believed that all fathers should break their daughters in. He told me mum when I was a child after watching a cowboy and Indian film that he believed all fathers should break their daughters in like Native American Indians do. And my mum said she thought it were a weird comment, but just dismissed it.
I mean, so did he get that from watching a film, did you say?
That's what my mum said. He got it from after watching a cowboy and Indian film that he'd said to her he believed all fathers should break their daughters in like Native American Indians, because he used to watch like How the West Was Won and stuff like that on a Sunday afternoon after Sunday dinner. We always used to watch a cowboy film.
If obviously that's what he said he's got it from, but when obviously we go into what he's actually fully done, that can't have been, there's no way that's come from a film, is it? That's just come from him being wrong in the head, sort of, doesn't even give it justice, does it? But he's obviously, if he's brought you up in abuse, so obviously he started out, I'm guessing, for as long as you can remember, that the physical abuse with you and your brother. I know that you've mentioned that he made you fight and that kind of stuff. That's before you got to like the age of, let's say, puberty, where you start, you know, obviously going through the changes into a woman, which is probably where he saw you as his, you know, girlfriend kind of thing. So was it abuse for as long as you can remember, like I said, the fighting with your brother and stuff while you were children, and then it got to 12 and it started to turn to sexual abuse? Is that correct to say?
No, my babysitter come forward and said that even when I were a baby, when my mum and dad were on the way out to the pub and she were babysitting, that my dad actually come up to me and with his forearm and his fist punched me on the settee to stop me from crying. So he's beat me from a child. And even before like the kissing started at 12, he used to play fight with me all the time and tickle me and smack me at the same time, so I'd be laughing and crying, but my nightie would be like, they call it play fighting. And he'd like give me love bites.
I think I heard you mention love bites, and like that were to deter other boys off you and stuff, and like almost like claiming you.
Yeah. Well, then he put a tattoo on my back, didn't he? With his name on it as well.
Was that when you were 17?
No.
Sorry, no.
I'd left at 7 before I was 17.
No, sorry.
I wasn't still with him at 17. So that was when I was 13, 14 that he put that on my back.
Did he put that on himself?
No, he took me to a tattoo artist in Barnsley.
Right.
Above railway station.
Yeah.
But then I used to walk past my dad, as well as him play fighting with me. He used to like get my nipples and twist them through my top.
Yeah. And
things like that. So, but all this grooming stuff, I didn't know it was grooming, and you know, it made me feel uncomfortable. And he used to say things like to me, when we were out, walking together, hold my hand all the time and say, "Who loves you, baby?" And I'd have to say, "You do," and he'd say, "You better believe it." And if I didn't say "you do," it'd say, "Who loves you, baby?" He'd keep repeating it, until I actually said it back to him.
I suppose you mentioned a good point, that you didn't realise that it were abuse. And I mean, if you looked at it from an outsider and how it's played out and we've got all the facts and stuff, it's like, well, of course it is, but that's easy for anyone else to say in that situation. But what were it like being a child, receiving all this from your dad? Like, and it's sort of like such a naive question, but how did you not know it were abuse? Do you know what I mean? Is it because it's your parents? So like, obviously, I look up to my parents. Thankfully, I didn't suffer any of this when I was growing up. So what they tell you is right is what you believe, sort of thing, isn't it? Is that why you don't class it as abuse because you don't know any different. Is that right to say?
Well, what happened was when he started kissing me,
Yeah.
after a few months, I did tell my mum about it.
Yeah.
And then, so obviously I felt uncomfortable, and I said to her, don't tell him, because I was scared of him, because he'd beaten me all my life. He had a thick black leather belt, and he used to beat me and leave welts on my bum, and make me bend over the settee with no pants on my hands and knees. And then if I started crying, he'd say, if you cry, I'll give you something to cry for. Before he'd started kissing me, my mum had left him, and we'd gone to live in a battered wives' home in Huddersfield at Newsham. And she'd left my mum and she'd left my sister Donna and my brother Paul with my dad, and just took me. And then she tried putting she laced the drinking chocolate with sleeping tablets or some kind of tablets, and when I got halfway down drinking it, she started crying and saying, don't drink it. And then I think she tried to do us both in. I think she knew from him saying that when I was a young girl as well about Native American Indians. I think she knew what were going to happen to me, else she would have took Donna and Paul. Why would she
Why
leave
only
them?
you?
Why only me? But then she always went back to him, you know, and she let herself be found, or, you know, he'd beg her and say, I'll change and things like that. So, like, she always went back to him. And so when we left, after I told him about him kissing me, we went to sleep on strangers' floorboards who she'd met on CB radio. And bare floorboards, bare mattresses up in Penistone. And then we got kicked out of there after a few months, and we went to another boarding house, this lodgings. And my mum found a newfound freedom by not being with my dad, because my dad was very jealous and argued with my mum. He used to hold guns to my mum's head. He used to hold machetes to her, threatened to cut her up middle, and I'd seen her wear herself in fear in the house. And
Oh, God.
he used to beat her when I'd never really seen him beat her. I'd seen him holding guns to her head, but he used to come in from pub on a night time, and they used to have roaring arguments, the aggression in his voice and fear, and she'd say, leave me alone, because he'd always make us sit upstairs in bed, and we'd be like frightened to death, sobbing upstairs. But he used to say, come down and I'll do it to you. So like the time I saw my mum with a machete, I'd sneak downstairs, and I'd seen it. I were on the stairs step, so I'd actually seen that, and I'd seen like him do it with the guns, because his guns, he didn't have them in a gun case. He had farmers shooting rights for all local farmers. He had gun licence, and all his guns were just like lent up in front room.
Normal. They normalised.
Not even in cases.
Yeah.
They were just there, so he could just pick them up any time.
How old were you at that point?
And then when my mum and dad had arguments, and sometimes my mum would phone police because of the domestic violence, the police would come and say, we can't get involved because it's a domestic. And sometimes the police had come and taken my dad's guns from him, like my mum living in fear from him threatening her with them. But my dad always got his guns back.
How?
I don't know.
But
one fella, police officer, Brian Fernley, because my dad once pointed his guns to a fella on the street because he'd called my dad a paedophile. So my dad pointed these guns and said to him, this is for Norman Booth. So I don't know who Norman Booth is. And said to this guy, my dad said, this is for Norman Booth. But then police come, and somebody phoned the police, neighbours, police helicopter. They cordoned the school off at the top of the street. They cordoned the village off, police. There were bulletproof men, police officers with bulletproof jackets on, telling him to come out. So this is what neighbours said. They come out with a white T-shirt as a flag. Surrender. But then the neighbours said it's they got questioned, and it went to Bradford Court. The witnesses, apparently, the ladies had told me that they didn't pay. They wasn't up to date by paying the poll tax, which is what it then. So the court threw it out. But the judge at the judge from that court circuit is Judge Pickles. My dad rented land off Judge Pickles in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he rented land off Chief Inspector Richard Ellis. And he rented land off and bought land from Simon Walter Fraser, where actually I told you we're practically given that land. And I've got pictures of that land as well. It looks very suspect with the containers and, you know, the kids' broken bikes everywhere, and, you know, and everything
like
else.
Chloroform and stuff like that.
Chloroform. Yeah.
So like, it kind of sounds from an outsider's point of view like you were given that land, like as in from these top guys, these people in power. We'll give you this if you help us out and cover this up, or
It's sort of like a look after this for me, isn't it? And we've got your back. And you've brought some photos for us to see, which we've had a look at, and you said you'll kindly send us and we can, place these or overlay these while we're talking.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the stuff that you see there is just shocking. And this is jumping ahead. Obviously, your dad's now in prison, but one thing that I don't know: does your dad still own this land? I don't know how that works if you go to prison. Is this land with all this? There's evidence on. Is this still belong to your dad? So is it like untouched kind of thing, or does it have to get handed over kind of thing?
Well, he sold the land in 2018,
Right.
and he told the lady we were selling the land, so he were going to go to New Zealand. Well, at the time the police got at the time when the police were investigating my dad for it, the police were investigating me for an harassment charge, and you can see my recordings that I made of Sergeant Inman and his PC Inman, or his Sergeant Baragwanas. When I did some research on Baragwanas, who refused to speak to me, were Inman's boss, Sergeant, his relation, Amanda Jane Baragwanas, were head of Auckland Police in New Zealand, and she's on the Queen's birthday list.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just because I'm an idiot, does that mean that the Queen, she's mates with Queen?
Well,
no way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all connected, isn't it? He's got friends in very high places that have done a lot of things to cover his...
He said if I go down, I'm going to take 20 down with me.
That's what your dad said?
Mm.
And you believe that on this land... do you want to describe this land a bit more? Because, I mean, again, I've done a bit of research. So what your dad owned this land, and what were on it kind of thing, and what do you think's on it?
Well, I believe from my dad, because of what I've heard about Judge Pickles, and that he was a prolific and notoriously known for being a prolific paedophile, and the ringleader of a paedophile. I've got a recording. I think you'd be wise to put it on the end of of this podcast, for people to listen to it. That I recorded. I had a conversation with my MP's office. I got them to try and help me get justice, and this conversation is about me telling them that my dad rented land off Judge Pickles, and I believe that because it took me 35 years to get justice from 1984 to 2019 and 6 attempts, I believe that he was police protected because he rented this land off Judge Pickles as well, that were connected. And I said, you must have known that Judge Pickles was a paedophile, notorious prolific paedophile, because a chief inspector had already told me that he was, but nobody could touch him up in Newcastle. So that's how I could put that to her. And she said, well, yes, of course everybody knew, but I've got to find his victims. She said to me, I've got to find Judge Pickles as victims.
It seems so bizarre that we'd openly say now, there's a police officer saying everybody knew he were a paedophile, but I don't know if it's me being naive again, but why the fuck didn't they do anything about it? Like,
because
it would bring the house of cards down. Because if Judge Pickles was a prolific ringleader of a paedophile ring, then who was in that paedophile ring?
If it's somebody
was
as
it
a
Sybil
judge,
Smith? Was it Epstein's ring? Does it go worldwide? Because my dad had friends called where he went hunting in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
I don't know where he got all his money from to do it when we grew up on a council estate where we were skip rats. And then he had all these people that he rented land from, all these high-profile people. But his friend, who he wrote to, was J.D. Pipkin. And when you look at J.D. Pipkin's relatives, and J.D. Pipkin, his friend, who he went hunting over there with, he worked for Dallas, Texas Airport, and he had his own aeroplane. And E.J. Pipkin is a senator over there in America.
it's getting higher and higher, isn't it?
It's getting
Where does
higher
it stop?
and higher.
You know, when you said plane, that back me up on this. Didn't Epstein have an island?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that plane obviously might have gone to... I don't know, I'm putting this together, but...
I think you're right though in saying the House of Cards, that if you said, well, why has no one done aught about it? I mean, again, I know next to nothing, but if one person is found to be guilty all them that know is connected, they're all also guilty for not coming forwards, aren't they? So they're just so connected and strong, strength in numbers.
Where's the black book with Maxwell's? Do you know what they call it? You know, why isn't that black book? And like when I reported my dad in 1984, when I went, if we digressed a little bit there, but if we go back to when he started kissing me, and then my mum took me and I was sleeping on the floorboards, spare bedrooms and things like that. This come out in court as well. I had sex with the landlady's son, who was older than me as well, there, and I were, you know, and I were missing. I didn't want to be. I felt like I was on my own all the time. I didn't want to be around all these people when I got all my friends back home, and my brother and sister still live with my dad. And then my dad got in contact with me and said, well, I meet him on Barnsley Market, which I did, and I took David with me, who was my boyfriend, who I were having sex with. So I were only like 13 at the time, and he was like, I think he was 19.
Right, okay.
And but I thought he was my boyfriend, and I was looking for comfort.
Yeah.
You know, I got nobody else. My mum were out all the time with a newfound freedom with her boyfriends. And then when I went to this Barnsley Market to meet my dad, David came with me, and David was messing about behind me, and he was saying, I must improve my bust. Well, my dad looked at him and he was like really mad. And but I'd forgot about the kissing because nobody else, this was a few months later, and nobody else had mentioned it. My mum had reported it to social services at the time, because social services came to my school at Shelley High and asked me about the kissing, and I told them, he'd been kissing me, but then nothing else was ever mentioned. So then my dad walked me back that time in Barnsley. He made David go home. We were angry with David for doing that with me. Right. About, and then my dad took me to the bus station, and I went back to my mum's house, and not long after that, it was a very strange relationship between me and my mum, and I said, I'm going back to live with my dad. And then my mum started shaking these tablets like she was going to take an overdose, but I didn't know why, because I'd grown up coming in from school and my mum taking overdoses and empty bottle of tablets outside at settee. I'd come home from school, see my dad hanging from rafters. So my mum and dad used to have arguments, and they used to end up, he used to say, if you don't have me back, I'm going to commit suicide. Or she used to like, couldn't take it anymore. She was taking Valium and, you know, lots of like mental health problems and things like that. So like I was used to that. So when I saw her shaking these tablets, for me at that point, she knew she was doing it. She was going, please don't go back. But she could have said to me, why I don't want you to go back, because nothing had been done about the kissing. But so when I went back, social services, even though my mum had reported it to social services and they'd been to school, Shelley High School, and spoken to me, they never did anything about it. A social worker come to my dad's house then and said to me, because I've been to live with my mum and now I've come back to live with my dad, it's obvious I can't make my mind up who I want to live with. So if I change my mind, I'll get put into a children's home. And my sister Donna had been put in a children's home and she was sexually abused. Boys used to shove soap inside her vagina, and I didn't want to go in the children's home, so I was trapped.
It's almost like you were made out to be, you were the one in the wrong throughout, you know, on multiple points that you said in your story. It's always, you know, you're only getting abused, but if you act up again, you're the one that's going to get punished. Do you know what I mean? With this, well, you make your mind up. You know what I mean? They're not even looking into, you know, if it's... You've got a common theme of being suppressed your whole life, and even if you've acted out at school, but then is that the one that they had to write? Your dad made them write an apology in the newspaper for. Do you know what I mean? You said it about the Huddersfield Examiner. Is that connected to the kissing at school thing?
That's connected to when I was a child. My dad used to beat me.
Yeah.
Like I say, and I used to go to school with bruises on my legs and on my bum and big welts.
Right,
and the
okay.
school had said, like, where's the children getting it from? And they accused my mum and dad of doing it. And then my mum and dad, and then the next thing I saw was an apology in the Huddersfield Examiner from the school, the head teacher, saying we're sorry that we accused him of like beating the child.
Where does that connection come from?
That was funny because Huddersfield Examiner, and if you look at it, my dad's always on the front page for saying, oh, my dad were working in a school in 2015, that same school that got shut down from him having his guns. You know,
Wow.
like the village got cordoned off and thrown out. And my dad were working in that school in 2015, repairing the pie dish and working with the kids. And there's a picture of him with all the children, with Jim Dodd, who was the mayor of Huddersfield, my dad's mate, drinking buddy.
Is
An
a
ed
drinking buddy with the
teacher.
mayor of Huddersfield?
Yeah.
I don't see how they've hired him to be in that school.
And then when I phoned the head teacher and said, why did you not do a DBS check on him? She says, I phoned the council board to do a check on him, and she was told not to because he worked he was the president of the Denbydale Pie Hall, and that it's like, say we got somebody in from the WI ladies, we wouldn't do a DBS check on all them, so no, don't do a DBS check on him. So she was actually told not to do a check on him.
It's always as if like someone from above it seems like people who you've raised alarms to have probably gone to help you within their systems, then the people above who's well connected to have had to go, we're not doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, maybe so, because like when the police, when they started investigating my dad, went to look for my social services records, they've all gone.
He's just dodgy, innit?
Were they all burnt, or is that something else? Sorry.
Well, yeah, they've destroyed them all.
Yeah.
They said they were legally destroyed, but that one, what's happened as well with when I went to the police in 1984 when I was 15-year-old and told them about my dad raping me, I made a 17-page statement, and I had to go to Huddersfield police station and have internal forensic tests done and jump up and down on blotting paper as well. I was bleeding. And then and when I've come to bring my case back in the future in 1985, they've said they've got no statements, that they've been destroyed, and but Brian Fernley, an ex-copper now retired, saw my original statements with a letter at the side of them saying these statements need to be destroyed because it's an embarrassment to the family. But then D.S. Barnes told me in 2012 or 14 that why would they look into your case when they won't investigate anybody else's cases back from the 1980s? Your statements haven't been lost. They've been burnt along with everybody else's from the 1980s. And Judge Pickles was the one who was the circuit judge in that area. And he rented land off Chief Inspector Richard Ellis. And he rented land, like I say, off Simon Walter Fraser.
To get back onto this land, 'cause I feel like that it's very interesting.
It's quite a big thing, isn't it?
When you say he had land off Judge Pickles and this guy,
Mm-hmm.
were it all close by, or would it to an outsider? Would it be weird as to say, well, why is this man owning land here, here, and here? Is that how it were, or were it all in like a proximity? Do you know what I mean?
Surrounding villages from Denbydale.
And
so
what?
one were in Denbydale, one Simon Walter Fraser's, that was near Cawthorne Park. That's on your way to Barnsley.
Is it? Yeah.
I don't know where Judge Pickles' land was, which one that was, but I know he rented land. He'd been seen handing money over to him.
So what were your dad's reasoning for having this land? Like, what did he do with it apart from have?
He kept pigs on it, or he kept these on these photos. He kept shipment containers with flowers, like it looked like a shrine.
Yeah, I've seen that photo.
And then there's like one where my dog were acting strange because I went on this land because I asked the police to go on this land. And because I believe that I believe all paedophiles keep trophies.
Yeah.
And I believe that the police refused to search my dad's house. To this day, they've never searched his house he got summons to court, so they've never got his computer, they've never got his mobile phone, never searched his house. And so he said the police said he didn't meet the criteria, even though there were 15 charges on the indictment, and that I'd told him that I wasn't his only victim, he'd actually abused other girls, including his niece as well. And he'd said to my next door neighbour over the garden fence when she were only 14 and I will have been about 4 at the time, he said to her, has the father broke you in yet? So that was when I was 4. And she come on a camping trip with us when we were younger, and she'd been brushing her teeth in the doorway of the tent, and she'd spilt some toothpaste on her t-shirt here, and my dad walked past her and says, what's up, did he miss the gob?
Juffy now. How old was she then?
She will have been about 14 and I will have been about 4.
He's always shown signs of that, hasn't he? Signs of that behaviour towards young girls.
He worked on fair. When he left home from his mum's, he was one of 15 children, and he went to work with Feast. So I didn't know if that were anything to do, and I travelled with fair, you know, rides, fairground
Oh,
rides.
right, okay, yeah.
Feast we used to call it, but other members of family have said that There's been inclinations of abuse, like when we were made to bend over with leather belts and things like that, but and other people have come forward in family and said they were sexually abused. And then there were a girl at Kirkburton School, not Kirkburton, it's near Darton, I forgot what they call it now, and she were an apple yard. And Kexborough.
Yeah.
Kexborough.
Yeah.
And she was in the sick bay one day, and this girl said to her, "Why are you here?" And she says, "I'm pregnant. I'm either pregnant by my dad or my uncle." She didn't even know, and she were an apple yard.
Is that your dad? Sorry.
I don't know which one. I don't know whether it's my dad or not, but I know my dad was.
Yeah.
And I don't even know which this cousin was, because my dad were one of 15. We had loads of cousins, and I didn't even know them all.
So if your dad's come up like that, because they always said that it comes from your childhood, don't they? Like, oh, that's why people end up doing what they're doing and stuff. So if your dad's like that and he's got 15 brothers and sisters or whatever, sure, there's got to be others, aren't there? That's what it's sort of alluding to. But
when I asked my auntie, if was this the running, does this run through the family? She says, "Oh no, my dad were really strict. All the girls were in one bedroom, all the boys were in another one. Because the first time my dad raped me, I said to him, what would my granddad say if he knew what you'd just done?" And he was still on top of me. He went, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I believe same as me that all fathers should break their daughters in." That's when he said to me, like Native American Indians, like, so that matched up with what my mum had said, when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because that's what he said to me. So then when I said to my auntie, my dad's sister, well, that's what he said my granddad believed the same as him. She says, my dad would be turning in his grave if he knew he'd said that about him, because incest and abuse wasn't in our family. She says there wasn't any of that. But if there were a lot of children, not everybody would have got it, I imagine.
No. I think you wanted to talk about the land there, Dan, didn't you? I want to go back onto the land a little bit. I know we keep talking about land, but it is very interesting. So we'll put these photos up on screen and stuff, but on one of the particular sites, you mentioned that there's obvious evidence of other people going through what you went through, because there's lots of kids' bikes, chloroform, and I think one interesting thing is like almost grave-like mounds. Is that right?
Yeah. Where my dog was laid on, you can see the mound where something's been buried.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like raised ground.
They know, don't the dogs? They have got that. Well, obviously, for someone it's the job, but they know when they can sense everything, can't they?
I don't understand why didn't the police go on and investigate it when I asked them to? When I showed them all the pictures, I sent them to them, because the police officer actually said to me, I said, "Well, I'll go on and do it then. If you're not going to search it, I'll go on." And he told me to, so that could have been a crime scene. So me, my son and my friend went on it. We actually went on it 3 times. So we went on it before he sold the land, when all the bikes, all the shipment containers with the flowers on that made it look like a shrine, when I found the chlorophoric acid. So I'd gone on there before he'd even attempted to empty it. Then I went back on the land when he'd been emptying all the containers, and I saw like acid baths and containers.
Jesus,
it looked like
really?
it looked like an acid bath. And the
that's
bags,
obviously to get rid of.
And he had another field which he kept pigs on from O'Kell's dad.
And we all know what pigs do. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yes, then he had that, and then
there's tons of evidence there. Why?
Bonfire. There were a bonfire that he'd made with piles of clothes on, with kids' names in, back of school clothes and things like that.
So would you? I don't want to pin you to a statement. Would you? It sounds to me like there's bodies and evidence of abuse. There's been some terrible stuff that's happened on this land that will not get. It's been hushed up, because to me, I get the impression that if this had happened, if anyone else had been crying out like you, that didn't have a dad that's got friends in high places, that had been straight on that land, that had been digging it up, that had been turning it upside down, it'd be all over the news, wouldn't it? But just because your dad were well connected with all these arseholes, it's just all been. That's exactly what's happened, hasn't it,
all
really?
his drinking buddies were coppers. People have witnessed him, having conversations in corner at Dunkirk pub, one-to-one with coppers, and then going into toilets, and then coming back out, and like I say, with Jim Dodd, Billy Jewett, he was councillor for Clayton West, that area. He said he believed that my dad were being police protected. I've got a recording of that conversation as well. and that he went to police, but police, once I'd written my book and named my dad in my book, he took my book to the Holmfirth police station, but the police had said to him, well, how can we believe anything? How can we believe anything that she's saying? And so they didn't do anything when he went. And he says, I've been a bastard in my time. He says, but not like your dad. Your dad is a bastard, and I believe he's a very bad man, and I've got the recording of that. And he was a counsellor. My dad's solicitor, Daryl Murnag, he been disbarred. You can Google him. He's been disbarred for passing on information from clients.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And his dad was the Lord Mayor of Huddersfield before Jim Dodd. There's so many connections.
There really is, isn't there?
What's interesting when you said earlier is that you said someone from Newcastle even knew, and it seems to me like the further away they get from these connections, a police officer in Newcastle said something. Yeah,
a police officer in Newcastle said to a friend of mine, and I've got this on record as well, that everybody knew Judge Pickles was a ringleader of a paedophile ring, but nobody could touch him. They were his words. And then when I stood for election in May where I live, and I was talking to a retired police officer who'd been in the force 30 years, and he said the overall consensus within the police force was to leave the little sluts and prostitutes alone. So they were blaming not the paedophiles, they blamed the children for being victims. Yeah, the victims for being sluts and prostitutes. But when I first reported it, my dad in 1984, when I was 15, in the rapes, I went to Penistone police station, and the police officer said to me, if this goes to court, your name will be blackened and dragged through the mud, and you'll be made out to be the biggest liar and slag going. Can you handle it? And all that's when Judge Pickles were like ring that judge as a circuit judge as well.
It's like everybody knows. Like anyone you spoke to already either knew, don't do that, or that's a bad idea. But I mentioned Newcastle because it's like, because obviously Newcastle's way up north, because they're so disconnected, she or he were obviously comfortable in saying it how it were, but the closer you get to the epicentre, it's like it's all hush hush. Do you know what I mean?
And there's just been the independent inquiry into child sex abuse, and that's cost £180 million of our taxpayers' money over the last 7 years. And the what do they call him? The MP for Bradford is just spoken up in Parliament. I forgot his name now. Saying that our constituents' voices need to be heard. We need to know now from this inquiry that the voices are going to be heard. So I've contacted him and said that my dad rented land from Judge Pickles, and I was a victim of my dad. My dad's got 20 years in prison, and I want to help these victims' voices to be heard. So, like, can I speak out and tell my story? And I've got this recording of my MP, my MP saying that Judge Pickles was notorious and that was his area. And he's ignored my email.
Even though he stood up and said, we need to listen to people.
Yeah, he's ignored my email, and I sent it to the Home Office. I can't have put my glasses down somewhere. I've got the names here. what do they call him? Oh, that's the MP Robbie Moore from Bradford. That's who's ignored me. Grant Sharp's ignored me. He's the Home Office now, previous like now. I've CC'd them all into it. Theresa May, she's ignored me. Yvette Cooper from Pontefract says I'm not her constituents, even though I'm just in Ackworth compared to like...
It's about 2 minutes away.
Yeah, 2 minutes away, really. So I've wrote to because victims of incest don't get a platform.
Yeah.
Because like a grooming gangs do, but like familial rape is like there's more victims of familial rape than any other kind of rape. But then again, nobody wants to speak about it, and I don't believe that children are getting safeguarded enough, because the amount of rapes that are reported shows that they're not being protected, because, I don't know, safeguarding are failing them, aren't they? The 100%. Voices aren't being heard for some reason. And when I went to the Say Something course, because I'm trained in safeguarding children, because I've been a youth worker for 20 years, I went on the Say Something course, and the tutor said, the reason incest isn't spoken about is because parents don't want the children to know that parents rape the children if it's not happening to their children. And it's like we have an SPCC, they have Panthosaurus saying if anybody tries to put their hands, you know, this is what they say. No one should make you do things that make you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable. If someone asks to see or tries to touch you underneath your underwear, say no and tell someone you trust and to speak to.
Yeah.
But like me as a victim of incest, I didn't know what my dad was doing wrong, and I didn't actually go to school, so I'm not going to hear the Panthosaurus video, you know, that's going to teach kids how to protect themselves. And even if I did, if I happened to be at school on that day, that's not gonna. My dad's gonna wheedle his way around that one because
Easily.
he normalised it to me.
If you quite literally take that advice, you know, speak to someone that you trust. It seems like you had no one that you could speak to or trust. So what use is that really?
When the people who you love and trust should be able to love and trust more than anybody in the world betray that trust, who else can you trust?
Nobody. And also maybe it ruins your trust in people.
It does
in a
ruin
way.
your trust in people, yeah.
Like, the number one person you should be able to trust is your family. They've already betrayed you in a massive way. So you're looking at every authority figure thinking, why should I trust you?
When I run away from my dad's at 15 when I couldn't take any more, even though the social worker said I had to stay there, I left at like 15 and a half, and I run away to my mum's. And we went to the police. Yeah, she did come with me, and we made that 17-page statement a week later because I didn't go straight away because I felt ashamed. I felt guilty. I thought
You've been made to feel that way.
I didn't do anything to stop it. He'd put a tattoo on my back with my name and his name. He'd put my mum's engagement ring on my finger. You know, he told me he loved me. It made me feel like he'd told me that his friends lived together as man and wife with their daughters, but they couldn't have a baby because it would be albino and things like that.
Did you ever discuss that sentence there? My friends live with their daughters like husband and wife. Did you ever like maybe meet up or like in passing see somebody who were friends with like your dad's? You know what I mean? Like your daughter of your dad's friends. Did you ever maybe bring it up and be like, "Is that true? Is this happening to you as well?"
I just hung on to every word. I didn't meet anybody else. I didn't see that going on.
What you meant to do? You look up to your parents, and even if they're doing the wrong thing, you wouldn't, like you say, you're at that age where you believe it, don't you? If he's telling you that it's normal to break your daughters into stuff, then what evidence have you had to suggest that that's not normal? Like, do you know what I mean? That's what's happening.
I lived in fear of my dad. I'd seen him being violent all my life, so that when, like one time, he laid me down in front rug, and fire were roaring, and it were burning my leg. And I thought if I just be quiet, it'll be over with soon. It'll you know, and if I be quiet, it'll hurry up. And I couldn't take the pain anymore. And I says, "Dad, my leg's burning." And he just started getting really angry. He got off me and he says, "You're only fucking saying it because you don't want to do it, really." And I went, "No, I do. But I did everything because I lived in fear. I just wanted to please him."
If you didn't do that, he'd just beat you.
I wouldn't dare. We my mum and dad, we never dared say no. We didn't back chat. We didn't, you know, we weren't allowed to, you know, we'd get sent to bed or we'd get beaten or.
I think that's why your mum. It sounds like she knew what was going to happen to you, but she, like you said, when she was checking the pills, but she didn't actually say it. Do you think your mum were also living in fear that she wanted to help you, but she couldn't actually act upon it because fear? Do you think that's what's happened?
I think my mum thinks I'm a bit like she don't believe that it's involved in any of this what I'm bringing out. When I brought it up to her, yeah, she's like, "Oh, you know, it's not, Carol. It's not like that." And I says, "Well, because my mum says she was sexually abused by her dad."
Right.
And I says, "Well, if you were sexually abused, why didn't you must have known what he were going to do to me?" And she says, "Well, whoa, like this to me over the phone." And she says, "What your dad did to me, did to you, it didn't compare to what my dad did to me." She says, "In my dad, like, he might have pulled his blankets off him when I walked in the bedroom, or he might have touched me here and there now and again." She says, "But what my dad did to me, he didn't, nothing like what your dad did to you." She says, "But you have to remember, Carol, I loved him. So how many other children are being abused in the home where the mums aren't leaving them or whether it's vice versa, because I know females can abuse children as well. Do you know what I mean? In that situation. And then so that people who can't speak up because they're not going to be believed.
And then when they do,
and I did speak up, and I did tell my mum, and she told social workers. They come to school, but then when I went back to live with my dad before he'd started raping me and nothing being done about it, school, social services should have done something about it then and intervened. But what happened then when my dad went and got legal custody at court?
Really?
Yeah, and they allowed him to.
So they've literally just not done the job at all there, have they? Social services.
Not safeguard. I mean, and once I got my dad sent down, I went to Kirklees Council to get them to investigate what these failings were with me, and they've refused to investigate the failings. And this was in 2020.
2020?
And then what they did, when I phoned social services after I got my dad sent down in 2019, and I phoned social services and I said, because the police had said that my social services record, because we had always had social services intervention as children, so I says, are they there? Have you got my records? Because police said that there wasn't there, and they went, no, the police have been for them, that we haven't got them. A lot of people, we got rid of them back in that day. Because we didn't have computers, so we didn't save them. She says, but hold on a minute. She says, I've got something here on file. She says from 2010. So your dad were reported in 2010, and his name and his date of birth and his address is on there, but the file's gone missing. And so the police officer looking for my file should have seen that something was being reported by me. Somebody reported my dad in 2010.
Not you?
But no.
Oh, wow. So that's more evidence that other people have gone
and that the police have ignored that.
Yeah.
Because they would have, if they've gone looking for mine, they would have seen that. Because if the lady saw that by looking, on the files,
a quick look for a file,
you'd see it. Because it's all computerised now. So she were looking on computer. It'd been reported.
I just admire you for being persistent and sticking out, and obviously you finally got justice, because you have quite literally every time. It appears that every time you've even tried to speak up from a young age, it's just been no, shut up. That's not. This is normal. You're not doing that. This will happen to you. We can't find the files. It's just like you've literally just been, like I've said it about 2 minutes ago, you've been suppressed from every single angle. So I just think fair play that you've finally managed to get the justice that you deserve, and it should have happened a lot sooner, shouldn't it? And this could have been stopped, and other things could have been stopped a long time ago. But where does this ring go? This connection of the upper echelon of society, or wherever they are, I don't know where it stops, because like you say, it's a house of cards. If they find one person guilty, it's probably going to be sickening who else to find guilty, and then where do we stand?
Well, my dad did say, I've told you, if I go down, I'm going to take 20 down with me.
Did he?
And he's got no, I don't think so. But I know that he's having meetings with his solicitors in the police, and he's in Category C in Doncaster Prison. Category C.
I don't know what that means.
Is that the worst or the best? I've forgot.
The least.
Oh, because Cat A is proper lockdown.
But the thing is, what kept me from it, what made me keep being persistent, was because in 1984, when I made that statement, and they said to me, if this goes to court, your name will be dragged through the mud and blackened and made out to be the biggest liar and slag going. But because it hasn't gone to court, whereas if it did and got thrown out, you'd never be able to bring the case back in the future, because that's the law. But because it hasn't gone to court and your brother would be classed as a juvenile witness, you could always bring it back in the future. So that gave me hope. So I'm glad that they told me that, because what happened was then I got when my mum kicked me out at age 16 and said, I've done my job now as a parent, you're on your own. And she also said, when you'd had enough of being treated like an adult by your dad, you came back to me, what the hell did you expect me to do about it? So she threw me out. I left my dad's with a bin line, a bag full of clothes. And my dad wouldn't give me my toys or my kiddie's Bible that I had and things like that. He wouldn't let me have anything except one bag full of clothes. And then when my mum kicked me out with a bin line, a bag full of clothes, so twice I've been homeless. I didn't want to my mum's, but twice I've had a bag full of clothes and I had to start again. And I were working at 16, I got a job on a YTS scheme at SR Gents in Barnsley in the sewing factory, and that there were two ladies there, Sharon's, one with my supervisor and one with my manageress, and another manageress were there as well, and they could see how stressed I was all the time, you know, and that I'd been kicked out, and that I were actually going out with a cousin. I'd met a boy on the CB radio,
Right.
and his mum and dad, Shirley and Roy, were really nice to me, and Kerry's mum and dad, and Sharon, my manageress, she was their niece. So when my mum threw me out, they let me stay with them for a couple of weeks. And then in the meantime, I started looking for somewhere to live. They said, you've got to find somewhere to live. And I found this boarding house up Grove Street in Barnsley. But the landlady said to me, you can't have a lock on the door. She wouldn't allow me a lock on my door. She says, and there's builders in this building, workmen in this building. So when Sharon and Shirley and then saying, have you found somewhere to live? Have you been looking? And I said, yeah, and I told them, well, I didn't know what they were meaning at the time, but they must have thought there's something dodgy behind that.
Right.
But I were only 16, so I wasn't thinking about being abused by older men, you know, by the workmen who were going to be like renting rooms from that building as well. So I went to Bridlington on holiday for a few days in caravan. I had my own room in caravan with their son, who I was going out with, Shirley and Roy. And when I got back, my manageress and supervisor at work, they'd found me a rented house up on Dodworth Road, on Farrar Street, and it was no central heating or anything, and it was partially furnished. And second-hand bed and everything, what people had slept in before. But I remember sleeping in that bed that first night by myself. It was a big double bed. I remember putting my arms around myself like this and thinking, Carol, I was scared. And I went, just pretend you're in a boarding house, like in a bed and breakfast.
All right.
And I remember thinking, but you've never stopped in a bed and breakfast, Carol. You've only ever stopped in a tent, you know, when you went camping to Wales or something like that when I was a kid. But that was the first night, I'll never forget it, when I started my journey of living on my own. And then I got in touch with Rape Crisis. So that's when my counselling journey started, because I still have counselling to this day, I still have therapy. And so I started going to, getting a train from Barnsley to Sheffield to Rape Crisis and having therapy there. And then I worked at SR Gents. My rent was £30 a week and I only earned £27 a week. So I had to queue up at Barnsley Town Hall for rent and rates rebate. And then by the time I bought my food, a Freya Benter's pie for one day, and I had to go on Barnsley Market and buy a pork chop or a tin of bolognese sauce and pasta, and I had a little freezer from a little fridge from a caravan about that big in my house, and I furnished it out, you know, with other bits apart from the basic furnishings that was in it. And I was in there for a few years, and then I met my husband. Me and Kerry broke up,
right.
And then I met my husband when I was 17 and he was 19, and he didn't come to live with me or anything, and we courted for a while, and then for a few years, and then I think when I was 21 we bought a house in Worsborough, and then I think I got married at 22. Or was it 23, something like that. Did the house up, and then I had a son and I had a daughter, and then I left him when Ella was 3 and when Jake was 7, because he was very controlling and manipulating and told a lot of lies. But I think when you've been abused, you don't realise, and you end up meeting someday similar to your dad.
Yeah. I was going to ask you.
I wouldn't say he was as bad as my dad, obviously, but he did make my life hell, bringing my kids up on my own. It wasn't nice. Yeah. You know, and I've not got any family. I didn't have any grandmas or granddads or cousins, so living in that house by myself and then going and meeting somebody else, you can imagine how vulnerable I was. And 100%. I've lived on my own now 20 years. And then in the time that I left him in 2005, that was the second time I went to the police. So the police in 84 wouldn't investigate. They said that there wasn't any evidence. Then in 2005 I went back to the police because I couldn't get on with my life. I was still in therapy. Yeah. And then in 2005 the police said to me, we've lost your original statements, and because there's nothing to compare it to, we can't open a case, and they shut door on me. So they wouldn't investigate, even though I got witnesses. And I was saying, well, why don't you take another statement from me then? Please take another statement. So she says, well, write it at home. Well, so I started writing it, and then there were only about 3 pages, and I said to her, is this the kind of thing that you wanted? Because my original statement was 17 pages long.
Yeah.
So she took it from me, and she gave it to CPS, and CPS said, well, there's not enough evidence. And I went, well, obviously, I haven't finished it, and I was just giving it for you to say, to see if this is the kind of thing I should be writing. So they shut the door on me then. So then I remember when that happened, I was crying and angry on the front lawn. And then I went back to the police in 2012. I went to Jordan Solicitor. I saw advertisement, child rape solicitors. I thought, oh, these will be able to help me.
Yeah.
They wrote to the police twice, and the police ignored them, didn't get back to them. And I contacted the police, and the police wouldn't investigate. Then I had a bowel cancer operation. I had 9 hours of surgery. And at that time, in 2014, I was raising money for the Lely Millie Foundation to climb Kilimanjaro, because when I left my husband, I became a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and first thing I did was buy a tent as well, and I did a skydive for charity, and I found that if I were doing things for other people, it helped me with my mental health. And so I was still
on your therapy journey, and to healing journey, maybe.
And I started going to Barnsley College to do an access course on psychology, and I started when my daughter was 3 doing teaching kids how to, even though I left school with no qualifications and I'm dyslexic, I went into schools and I started volunteering to read with the kids, and the kids like to read with me, and that opened my eyes to see how other parents parented the children and how the teacher interacted with the kids as well. Because I'd gone on a parenting course as well when my children were younger, because I'd gone to my doctors and said I can't control my son, even when I shout at him and smack his legs, he still won't do as he's told. So she put me on the Webster Strachan parenting course. She said, do you want to try it? We're a 12-week course in Barnsley, and that taught me about time out and lots of other parenting skills, which I'm grateful for, and things like that.
You wouldn't have had a chance to learn that growing up, though, because you didn't have a normal, well, not normal, but a healthy environment to grow up in, did you? So you had nothing to put, being a parent yourself, you had nothing to compare that to,
no.
In a healthy way, did you? So that must have been good for you, that course, and showing you how to do stuff and how to get on with that, the parenting side of life.
And also meeting Kerry, that was a blessing, and seeing his mum, seeing how that relationship, because they could have arguments without them getting beat to death, so they can express their points of view, and they might have been shouting and roused sometimes, as families do, but nobody were getting beaten for it. But why one of the reasons I speak out as well, even though I lived on my own in my rented house at 16, for me today, children can't get an house until, luckily they were my guarantor, my manageress. Kids can't get guarantors. No. I didn't even know that until they didn't tell me they were my guarantor. They didn't say that to me.
They kind of took you under the wing.
They just said to me, so that my house, when you have a house, the guarantor, they just said to me, make sure you come to work every day like this. And then, so now when kids are being abused now in the home, victims of incest, which is rife and not enough's being done about it, where do they go? Because, yes, some people do get caught in the net, and they can get the support and help, but they get put in a children's home, obviously.
Not always a safe environment.
Not always a safe environment. They're saying things have changed, but how come, statistics say that still incest, familial rape in the family is rife? What could you do about it to stop that, to lessen the figures, to safeguard children? Obviously, speak out about it more, but nobody will give incest a platform for victims to speak out on. Grooming gangs, you can speak out about it. The papers talk about rape, but incest is never spoken about.
You've got a list as long as your army people that you've contacted, emailed, and professionally emailed and stuff, and to talk about incest and rape within the family, and no one seems open to listening, do they?
And when I went to the independent inquiry into child sex abuse up in Liverpool, the Truth Project, I should have had a 2-hour meeting with them, and it turned into a 4-hour meeting. And I told them about what had happened, with my dad, and I told them about Judge Pickles as well. They passed that information on to their legal department. Legal department passed it on to Operation Hydrant. Operation Hydrant passed it on to West Yorkshire Police, because that's what they do, the local police departments, to investigate my allegations. And when I got my dad sent down, I rang the police and said, are you going to investigate the paedophile ring now? And D.I. Thorns, he went like this. Thought you'd have forgot about that. Now you got what you wanted, Carol.
You're joking.
And then they've said to me, they've told my human rights lawyers, because I've got a civil claim now against West Yorkshire Police for 35 years of serious systematic failings to investigate my dad.
Good.
They've told them as well, unless I've got other victims of Pickles and and members of the paedophile ring, that they won't investigate it.
Why? That to me seems like that's their job. Surely you're coming to them with evidence.
But I've got a recording of the MP's office saying everybody knew he were a paedophile.
You're coming to them with evidence, then surely they take that and they say, right, we'll investigate this now. But it doesn't seem like that's what they want to do.
Yeah, because they can't, because the ones above that, they've all at it, aren't they? That's just the theme of this, isn't it?
And then I went back to the police in 2012, when they shut the door on me again in 2012. They said that I had to find victims of Appleyads, the only way for it to go forward.
Which is their job.
Yeah. So I did. I found my cousin.
All right.
But she didn't want to speak out about it, because she'd made peace with my dad over her mum when she died. Over her dying deathbed, she told me about that. Plus, she'd already been to court with a friend over familial rape, incest court case, and it got thrown out, and she couldn't put herself through all that again. And my dad had said to me when I was a child about my cousin, his niece. He said to me, "You're going to end up having a dozen abortions like our Tony by the time you're 18."
Juffy now.
And he were raping his own niece.
Your dad were? Oh my God.
And that's his sister's daughter.
Did your auntie know about that?
Yeah, I've heard she knew about it, because her dad were at her as well, I've heard.
And is the connection, is that your dad's brother or your dad's sister?
My dad's sister.
And
she were called a little slag as well, like my dad used to call me a slag.
The niece were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad enjoys, I think paedophiles do, they enjoy grooming them and then getting away and then calling them slags.
Making them feel like the dirt.
And then I tried again in 2014, I'd had a bowel cancer operation, and I had a year to raise the money for the Lely Millie Foundation, which was a charity close to my heart, because their daughter was born with Aicardi syndrome, and she had out-of-control epileptic seizures like my sister, and she needed 24/7 care like my sister Donna did. And so when I saw the charity at my gym, I've always gone to a gym as well to help me with my mental health. And so when I saw this opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro for the Lely Millie Foundation, I took it on board. Obviously, because of Lely Millie, I felt for her, in memory of her. She'd died, and obviously it brought back memories
connects
of
to your sister.
To my sister. And then because my sister, she committed suicide, Donna.
How old was she?
Donna was 32 when she committed suicide.
Was she in? What was she doing with her life at that point?
Donna, she was simple, Donna. She couldn't tell a lie to nobody. She had special needs. She was simple. She was brain damaged. She went to a special school, and she was put in a children's home, and that's one of the reasons I did this climb, because it was to open a respite centre in memory. Donna shouldn't have been in that children's home in Dewsbury in Coombshill. She should have been in a respite centre.
Just for me.
She was in a children's home, and they called them for naughty kids. They're not naughty kids. The children were put in that children's home because they've come from backgrounds where either the parents have died, sadly, or they've been abused, or the parents from challenging backgrounds anyway.
Yeah. So respite, is that like just care more than like you're naughty. It's like, oh, this person needs care because of
yeah,
right,
like
okay.
if I had a child and they were severely handicapped and they needed 24/7 care, that can be a big toll on a family.
Right.
So sometimes, you know, respite centres can be set up to give you a bit of respite.
It's different to needing a home over your head because you haven't got one, as opposed to needing a home over your head and the care and like facilities, isn't it? I suppose. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, but in respite centres, you can stay for a few days as well.
Yeah.
But my mum told me that she put Donna in there. My mum and dad had decided to put Donna in there because Donna couldn't mix with children her own age. Well, she was never going to be able to because she had special needs. Donna had seizures, and I used to have to hold her down because, like, she'd start off. A fits would like crescendo into a scream. She'd be like, and she'd scream and burst lips, and her lips would go blue, and she collapsed to the floor, and she'd be like, you know. Donna,
And that's all when you were a kid as well.
Yeah.
Hard to see that, innit? Your sister going through that, I imagine.
Yeah. Out of control ones as well, one after another sometimes. You know, even sedating her didn't stop her from having them seizures, grand mal seizures.
Yeah.
They're really bad. And then so Donna and Donna used to come home sometimes at weekends, and she used to tell me about being sexually abused in there, that lads were pushing soap inside her vagina.
Oh, of course, yeah.
That's when the social worker said to me they put me in care if I didn't stay with my dad, you see, so that's what I was scared of. Plus she were getting bullied all the time in there. She used to tell me stories about her being bullied and stuff.
That is
imagine
shocking.
It's just unthinkable, isn't it, what she suffered in there. But then what happened was as well, she tried to live a normal life, and she met somebody called Harold, and they got married, and he got frog marched out of house one morning. He'd been sexually abusing his niece along with dad and granddad, so that pulled all her world apart as well.
Donna's husband?
Donna's husband,
oh,
yeah.
My God. It, like you said.
And then they took a child off her. She had two children. One of them, he died, Daniel. He was severely handicapped. And then she's got a child now, and she's 31, and she's got special needs.
Yeah.
And but she was taken off Donna as well because social services said she couldn't look after her, and
placed in care.
My mum met a prison officer down in Aylesbury, so took her away from Denbydale, from Penistone, Barnsley, where I could go and visit her and things like that.
Did you lose contact, you and Donna, then? You know, because you got separated.
We had telephone contact every day. Donna phoned me every day, and Donna took 22 attempts to take her life.
22?
Yeah, never telling anybody either. She was in Stoke Mandeville. She was really poorly and with mental health problems. She took 27 tablets a day just to try and control her epilepsy. Mogadon, Tegretol, Epilim, and lots of... She was yellow when she died, and she was really bloated and things like that before she died. And she life was too cruel for her to continue living. Life had been too cruel to her.
Yeah.
And then... in the times that I were trying to get justice, I went to see my dad. I got a fate when I left my husband. I thought everybody were robots because, like, you know, people were so cold and uncaring.
No emotion.
And I got no emotion, no feelings. And I were on my way to therapy one morning, and something told me to go to this church one morning, this St George's Church in Barnsley. And I went on Valentine's Day, and the sermon was about how husbands should love their wives and how wives should love their husbands. And I just couldn't stop crying. I thought, why hadn't I been taught this? I didn't know. I just felt like falling on my hands and knees. I was just broken. And from then, Jesus taught me what love is. There was nobody else to teach me what love was. You know, we've been brought up in such a violent family. You know, my sister was suffering. You know, my brother is obviously still suffering because he won't talk to me now. My brother, he says that if you hadn't been my dad's girlfriend, then my dad would still be my hero. He calls me a slag.
So he's blaming you?
Yeah. Like my mum now, she won't talk to me. She says, she's already sent me a letter, I can't go to a funeral. You're always living in the fucking past. She says you won't, you know, and I want answers from her. I want to talk to her, and she won't. So I'm just getting,
What?
no closure.
No.
And like now, because I've took a civil claim out on West Yorkshire Police, because I tried again in 2015 when they closed the door on me in 2014 again. I tried again in 2015 because I wrote my book. I took a diary up Mount Kilimanjaro and kept a diary of all my surroundings. And then about how I made the dream come true, about my raising the money, what it took for me to raise the money, and then being diagnosed with bowel cancer 4 months into a year's fundraising that I had to do to climb the mountain for the charity, having 9 hours of surgery, still climbing to the summit 8 months after without any insurance. I turned chemotherapy down.
Wow.
I couldn't tell the insurance company because I knew they wouldn't let me do it. I couldn't afford it. And then I wrote this book, and I left school with no qualifications.
That's an achievement in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've published it myself. That's my own artwork.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And then when I started writing that book, I had friends to come and help me proofread it.
Yeah.
And then when I got towards the end of it, I said to my friend Graham, I says, I'm going to write my dad. I'm going to name my dad in this book. And he went, you can't. I went, who can't? He says, you can't because you'll get done for libel. He says, you'll get done. It's against the law. And I went, I don't care. I said, I want him to sue me. I want to get me day in court. Nobody, the police were shutting the door on
One
me.
way or
I want to
another,
get him. I want to get him.
Bring it on.
So I named him. And then when I uploaded it to Amazon, it had to go to their legal department, my book. I thought, that's it. There's never going to, because I'd named names in my book.
Yeah.
And they said, there's no way they're going to publish it. I thought to myself, there's no way they're going to publish that book. Anyway, they come back and said they'd publish it. So first thing I did when I published my book was post it to my dad. Well, I didn't put his name on it. I posted it to my dad's address. I posted his wife's. Because I thought if I give it to my dad, he's going to hide it.
Yeah.
So and I'm not an Appleyard. I grew up, my dad's called Elliot Appleyard.
Right.
At this point, I've changed my name because I don't want to be an Appleyard. It maimed me on my back. It took me 6 years to get this tattoo removed with acid pen. I went 6 years of agony, pain. We like going through with a needle deeper than what it would be if you had a tattoo to break the skin, and then putting acid pen on it to bubble the ink out. So I've gone through all that
to remove the name, so you want it gone off everything.
So why could you not just do laser? Is that because you wanted to make sure that is
doctors won't do laser?
Right.
Doctors won't let me have it.
Even just a simple, you want to get a tattoo removed that reminds you of past,
and all
and
my medical
interested.
records show that over years that this, I kept saying, she needs this tattoo removing for stress, but
of course, because every time you see your back, you're reminded of a traumatic experience that you've been through, groomed and raped. So every time you see that,
how can they not even honour just a simple request? You know what I mean? They're even saying no. The
police wouldn't even send forensics out. That was his name on his back. Do you know what my dad told the defence? My dad told the police that I were lying about the tattoo and that Sam was the name of the dead dog that he'd shot. Because my dad told me to stop calling him Sam, because my dad's called Elliot, and he's told me to stop calling him Dad when he were raping me, and then to start calling him Sam. And I went, Sam, why would he want me to call you Sam? And he says, when your name's Elliot, and he says, because Sam was my nickname, but I think that were unfair. So when you think about it, why did he change his name, Sam, unfair? Because people, if they were raping, abusing him, unfair, and he told him he was called Elliot, it's a name to remember, isn't it? They probably all changed the names.
Chuffing
hell.
And then in 2015, I went back, and 2014, they closed the door on me again. I went back in 2015, and people come forward then as well from the book, more people. I'd got 20 witnesses, and the police closed the door on me. Supposed to have been investigating my dad from 2015 to 2017, and they closed the door on me. You can hear that interview on my YouTube channel, my Conquering the Impossible YouTube channel.
We'll link
the
that.
Decision meeting, not to charge my dad. They gave me a choice. They said when the decision not to charge my dad in 2017, they said that I could access my right to review. So I accessed my right to review, and I got to have it in within 3 months. And then in the meantime, the police had got an harassment charge on me, saying that I was harassing my dad, even though my dad come to the car boot sale in King's Fitzwilliam, next door to my village. And after the decision not to charge him, even though he got an harassment charge on me, saying I was harassing him, so he come 20 mile nearly from Denbigh to Fitzwilliam to do a car boot. He got his mate, Peter O'Kell, who my dad rented land off where he kept pigs, to friend me on Facebook and talk, and because I needed a fence building, because O'Kell were friends with my friends at Denbigh as well. I didn't think there were anything fishy about it. So he says, I'll help, and I'd seen his woodwork, like what he'd built a cabin and what he'd done, and I needed fencing doing in my garden. So he says, we'll go to Kingsley Boot Sale and we'll try and find you some. And so he picked me up in his big white van, and we got there. And then he says to me, what would you do if you saw your dad now? And I went, I feel like that's...
What are you saying
I feel like you know him more than you're letting on. No, I don't like this. Anyway, we didn't find any wood, and he said I'd got to go back and look for these shorts that he'd seen earlier on, these khaki shorts. And he says, and I says, well, I want to get some fruit and veg. So he says, you get your fruit and veg and meet me at van. I went, no, I want to come because I want to look at some more stalls while you're looking for these shorts. And he was adamant that I didn't go with him, but I were adamant, I don't want to just get my veg and go back to the van. I'll come with you to get them shorts.
Yeah.
So then, next minute, I hears him saying hey up to somebody, and I looks up to see who he's saying hey up to, and it was me dad and Janet.
At this car boot sale next door to your house?
Yeah. So, I remembered looking, and I nearly put my head down, and I was going to walk off, and in my head I was saying, Carol, what are you doing? He's just like called you a liar, and the police have like put the lid on you as well, you know, that you're not going to get your day in court that you've been fighting 35 years for. Are you really going to walk past and not say anything? And this is what was going off in my head. And I turned around and walked back a little bit, and I just said to him, you raped me when I were a child. And she is saying, no, I didn't. Go away like this. You're lying. And then and his wife was saying that as well. And I said, well, if I'm lying to his wife, why did you ask me to meet you in Barnsley Market? Because she rang our sergeants when I was 16-year-old and said my dad had asked her to marry him. And she says, but I've heard he's been raping you. I want to know before I answer him whether you know the truth. And I says, only if you're prepared to believe me, because I'm not going to waste my time. So I met her in Minerva Cafe in Barnsley when I was 16. And I told her all about it. And so I felt like she would believe in me. And then she just suddenly come out and says, your dad's upstairs in Market. She says, do you want to see him? And I was like, and didn't know what to say. I weren't expecting her to say it. No. And someone told me to say yeah. So I went upstairs and she went in cafe. And then we spoke on red plastic seats upstairs in Barnsley Market. And I said, yes, if I were all right. And I says, yeah, I am. He says, what are you up to? I says, I've met somebody called Sam. He's a builder and he does karate. I thought, oh my God, it's all the same. It's my dad. And he was a builder, you know, like outside working for farmers, you know, dry stone walling and stuff. And then, and he did karate as well. And I said to him, why did you do what you did? And he says to me, I'm sorry, it's because I loved you as a person and not as a daughter. So he's admitted what he's done, but she wasn't there. And then when I found my faith, someone told me to go to his house on Father's Day. I got this adrenaline rush through my body. Right. And I went to his house and I knocked on his door to say, I forgive you, and took him a Father's Day card. And I went into his house then, and again, Janet went in the room. She's never there. And then we sat round the table in the kitchen, and he started talking about my mum and dad arguing all the time. And I says, I know what happened between me, you and my mum. I says, I were there. I says, but what you did to me, you were an adult and I were a child, and I thought you might be at least sorry for what you've done. And he just looked up inaudibly and went, I'm sorry, like that. And I says, I thought you might at least look me in the eyes and say it. Anyway, I've come to say what I wanted to say, and I got up to go, and he hugged me and he kissed me on my shoulder with his big wet lips, how he used to kiss me. And I thought, I'm sorry. No, you aren't sorry. And I tried to get on with my life, and then
Did you? Sorry, Carol. Did you say that you went to said that you forgive him, or you'd sort of come to peace with what's happened? Is that right? Why you went to go see him on Father's Day?
I hadn't. What I was trying to do, I was testing my faith, because my faith was telling me that the only way you will find peace and healing is to forgive.
Right.
So I was testing my faith to see if it worked.
Right, I get you.
And it didn't work.
It's proved, yeah.
I wasn't in a time to, and like now, I can't forgive him for what he's done. And people say if you forgive, then it stops you from carrying.
It's putting him back on you. You shouldn't have to forgive. It's unforgivable what he's done. I
don't understand that forgiveness game. I can't get my head around it.
It's an easy get out of jail free card, literally, isn't it?
Just like I couldn't understand what manipulation was, because one of my therapists kept saying you're getting manipulated by my ex-husband. You're being manipulated by your dad. But when you're brought up, there's quite a few things. And like what my counsellor said to me, one of my therapists was, she said to me, she says, what about trying questioning things like why, what, where, when and how? So she was teaching me how to stand up for myself and question things, because I've been talked at all my life, and I've been to respect my elders, and like even when I got married, I hung on to every word he said. I'd got to find Carol, so when I left him, that's how it was time for me to find who I was, instead of trying to please and keep the peace all the time so there wouldn't be arguments.
I was going to ask you earlier, just because I heard you mention marriage there, and I might be taking a back step, and we'll come straight back to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you went through growing up, how does that affect your like adult relationships? Going forward, like with partners and stuff. That's got, to me, it's like that's got to have an impact on you, like, because you've been through such horrible things. Like, how does that affect you during your relationships moving forward?
I think a lot of people are impacted from the relationships, because like even though I struggle with meeting somebody who I can trust not to manipulate, abuse me, whether it's physically or mentally, I seem to fall for the same kind of men that do that. I've not lived with anybody in 20 years. Since I divorced my husband 20 years ago, I remember Miriam Stoppard in 80s, Dr. Miriam Stoppard, speaking on this programme on television about why so many children were sexually abused by the stepdad, is because women are letting men come and live in their lives, without them even getting to know.
Yeah.
So that always stuck in my head. So even though I've had a few relationships, or been, because my children, when I divorced the dad, my children used to go to his at weekends. I had my weekends free because he wouldn't look after them in the week, so like I had 3 weeks out of the month. So I had long distance relationships, so I could still look after Jake and Ella, and that suited me because I was able to do my reading with kids in school, or like, because my ex-husband wouldn't let me go to work, he wouldn't let me go to college. He said that if I ever got a job, any money, because I used to have to ask him for every penny I wanted. He wouldn't. And
that's controlling.
He's very controlling. And he said, if you do, I said, I want to work. I don't want to just be a full-time mum. I want to get the childminder. I want to go out and work. Because I was doing houses up for him, and like he's a millionaire now in construction. So every part of my life was revolving around him and the children, and it felt like I couldn't have anything.
Helping him build his dream.
And then when he come home from work, and if his tea weren't ready and things weren't done, he'd be like, what have you done all day? Well, I've been to mother and toddler. Oh, I wish I had your job, and things like that, just putting me down all the time.
Typical bollocks, isn't it? Really.
Where's your life there? You need your life as well, don't you? Your own independence and your own worth, and like I said, you want to get a job, you want to go out and do reading with kids. You should be allowed to do that, shouldn't you? You don't want to be controlled like that. That's obviously not good.
It's not an healthy relationship. No, but I didn't know it wasn't an healthy relationship until it dawned on me. I mean, we were together 15 years before I left him.
Yeah.
So I gave it a good go, but then I blamed myself for not being able to, because I knew what I was leaving, but I didn't know what I was going into. So that were a leap of faith, actually leaving him. And he wouldn't leave the house. So I had to pretend that we were going to had to say to him, we'll start courting again, it's not working. So I lulled him into a false sense of security. And so he went back to live at his mum and dad's, and then he rang me up and said, right, are we going to go out for something to eat and drink? And I went, no, I'm not. Because I tried to end the relationship for a couple of years, and he wouldn't go. He says, I'm not leaving this house. So I had to try and get away to leave without, because my friend had said, Carol, you can't leave the house. You've got 2 kids. How are you going to look after them?
That's true.
And I ain't got no family. I ain't got no mum and dad or aunties and uncles or anybody to go
Just
to.
you.
And when I divorced him, he's the only boy in his family. His family divorced me, so they would never help me look after the kids either for divorcing their blue-eyed boy, because he was only son out of his 3 sisters and things like that. So and when I got divorced, the divorce cost £32,000, and the judge got a mediator to try and sort out the maintenance and the when you see the kids, access, and he wouldn't agree to anything. We were in this room, she put us in this room and with the mediator for 3 hours, and he wouldn't agree to anything. And then when I got out of that room, she gave me a big hug, and she says, I wish you all the luck in the world, sweetheart. You're dealing with a little boy in long trousers. Whatever you say black, he will say white, and whatever you've got kids to, he'll make your life hell. And he did. But I found a way through it, and we had social workers intervention, and social workers blamed me for why the kids were affected by the relationship ending, because he got the big posh house. I bought a council house, an ex-council house, and I couldn't afford to do it up and things like that. But I was taking kids on holiday, trying to. Even reported me to because I'm on even now, I'm on sick with complex PTSD.
Yep.
But it's a good job I was, and I fought for them benefits, because I didn't have anybody to help me look after my kids. But what my ex-husband did as well, he reported me to sick and said she's had 28 holidays in so many years and she's not sick, and he won't accept and acknowledge that I were affected by my childhood trauma as well, from being terrorised in the home. So I was still trying to bring my kids up on my own without any support. But he's always saying, calling me a slag, why can't your mum go out and get a job, like anybody else, and things like that. And not in realising the impact, that childhood abuse, as on a person.
Like everyone says, it's not, you're on the sick, it's not physically injured, but mentally, you've got PTSD, and that's a massive thing, That's insane that you can't see that.
What should we? Obviously, you've got kids. You mentioned them. I think they're probably similar ages to us. We're 26. I think you said the youngest is 26. Is that right? So how are they? How's your relationship with them?
And, my children are my world. And I talk about the bio on my book. I'm a mother of 2 wonderful children.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of them. And I'm I try to do my best by them. I've not been the perfect mum. Obviously, given the tools that I've had, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've reached out for help as well. And this book now is it's going to be the first of a trilogy. I've got 3 books coming out in April, which this book is like Conquering the Impossible, Making the Dream Come True, which my daughter named when I says, what am I going to name my book? She says, Conquering the Impossible. I know, Mum, Conquering the Impossible. Yeah. And I put Making the Dream Come True on the end. And then I says to our Jake, what am I going to call my next book? And he said, I know, Mum, how I conquered the impossible. And I'm my 35-year fight for justice. And then I've had to pay £5,400 for the trial, the 8-day trial in Leeds Crown Court. The judge, I had to write to the judge for permission for my transcripts from my court case. Yeah. So, and for the 8-day trial, it's cost me £5,400 to get them. So that'll be a book in itself, the trial.
Right, you've paid for someone to transcript it and record it in that sense.
You've got to use their transcribers.
Yeah, you can't get your mate in, can you, to sort it, I suppose.
And then the next book after that is my civil claim and investigation into West Yorkshire Police and the paedophile ring.
That's gonna be a very interesting read.
They're going to be the 3 books. And then and where I'm at now today.
Yeah.
And then I want a film to be made, because all that will raise awareness to incest, because there's no deterrent and prevention strategies in place, and where people will feel empowered to speak out themselves, victims and survivors. And then after that, I want to open a respite centre and hopefully children's homes, my own charity called Conquering the Impossible, making the dream come true, where victims of incest, survivors, victims especially, and families can come together as well. So survivors can come and they can, speak and have coffee with other survivors, and I'll have workshops in my respite centres where there'll be libraries of books I've read to heal, to help me on my healing journey, where there'll be workshops, where just try and inspire people to try and move on with their life, and hopefully I'll be able to give them legal advice so they can get justice. The justice that I was denied, and hopefully people who've got enough evidence, will be able to pursue that and never give up fighting for justice.
That's inspirational in itself.
But if I'd have given up fighting for justice, my dad would still be free to rape other children, and that's what the police were allowing to happen.
Almost stopping you.
Stopping me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had 10 witnesses in court. So when I did my right to review and I finally got it overturned, my dad threatened to kill me when I went to Kingsley car boot sale, and I started shouting, and I said, I'm not a liar because you asked to meet me in Barnsley Market. And then my dad's going, go away. She got a pair of garden shears and shoved them in my face and went, I'll fucking have you. I'll have you with these garden shears in my face. I went, go on, do it. Like with my hands down by my side, and then my dad went and brought her around, and I says to him, he's saying, go away, little girl. I says, and you know what you've done. I said, even when you were still lied on top of me, and I said to you, but I was shouting it because I wanted everybody to hear it at this boot sale. When I said to you, what would my granddad say if he knew what you were just doing, what you've just done? And you said to me, don't worry, sweetheart, all father, he believes same as me that all fathers should break their daughters in. I was shouting that, and people were stopping and just watching. Nobody interfered. Nobody said anything. I was disappointed that, and the person who did see what had happened, and I know this lady's name, and Peter O'Kell will say it, he denied it to the police that he'd seen it, and the police said that there's no evidence that it happened, that there were no witnesses. And then my dad come round the stall then, because I was shouting, he'd said that. He put his head in my face, touching my nose, and he went, I'll fucking have you. I'll fucking have you. Like that to me. And I went to him, go on then, do it. Anyway, I walked away, and I was going to walk away, and I decided to take a photograph of him. And there's a photograph here. That's part of it. When he sat on his van, you'll be able to see the full one, you know, when I send you it.
Yeah.
And that's him. And then I put it on Facebook, because I've been using just words before when I was I'd gone public at this point, because police weren't doing anything about it. I put it on Facebook, and it went viral, like hundreds of thousands of views.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I kept putting it on Boost, and I've had 28 30-day bans on Facebook speaking out about him. 28 30-day bans. And they were taking all my posts down as well. And so when he got that harassment charge on me, I said, Alex Wilson, who should have been investigating my dad, I applied for my freedom of information stuff, and everything's come back, all my statements, everything's been redacted. But on the harassment charge, from my freedom of information, Gary Inman were investigating me from my dad's behalf for harassment. Alex Wilson's name's on that as a investigating officer for arresting me for harassment. And I says, you're supposed to be investigating my dad, not me.
That's a conflict of interest.
But then he'd been saying to me, we've been gathering evidence against you, Carol. And I went, why are you gathering evidence against me, Alex Wilson, when you should be gathering evidence against my dad? So anyway, when I finally got... Because I had to go in for a VA, Gary Inman wanted me to go to Holmfirth police station from Ackworth, which is 20 mile away, because I got a phone call. I've got the recordings there on my YouTube channel as well. And he said, we've had a complaint about you've been handing your book out round Denbydale, and telling people that your dad's a paedophile. Oh, he didn't say that on the phone. You've been handing your book out round Denbydale. I said, what, my book that I've legally published? legally published. I've written
That they can buy off Amazon. Like, so
you can buy off Amazon.
it's not your fault, is it?
No.
It's free speech. I think it's amazing that the only way you've had your voice heard is by paying to publish it to external, and then they can't do anything about it, can they? Because it's your words in a book that people can buy. So it's been good for you.
So my dad's tried to get an harassment charge, and he's been saying somebody's been setting his van on fire and writing Elliot Appleyard's a paedophile outside at Pyall as well in big writing. So he's actually get up on ladders and paint it and whitewash it all off. And then somebody's been putting leaflets under car windscreens saying that Elliot and I have been doing this, but they're accusing me of doing all this.
Could be another victim.
No, well, it could be other victims who've read my book.
Yeah.
And so he said I've got to go to back door at 6 o'clock at night without a solicitor. And he says he threatened to, on these interview tapes, you'll hear him threaten to arrest me 5 times and say that I couldn't have a solicitor, duty solicitor, unless he arrested me, and he wanted to avoid arresting me. He just wants me to come in and give my account, and if I just deny, he's only got 1 or 2 questions to ask me. If I just deny it, he'll just he'll just tell me to leave. There'll be no more case. But yet I refuse to go to to Holmfirth, because Kurt Burton and Holmfirth police stations is the same one where all my dad's police friends are working from.
Convenient.
And I was scared my dad were going to be there. I had visions I were going to get my head slammed on the table, because he was telling me I couldn't have a solicitor, and if I'd have but
no
then,
eyes on this room, no legal eyes.
Yeah,
probably would have been money.
Exactly, you can hear it all on these recordings, the Inman tapes on my YouTube channel, what they were doing. So then I had to have a solicitor, and my friend said to me, Carol, do you not go to that VA without having a solicitor? So he put me in touch with somebody who he knows, a solicitor, and it turned out, and he come in for the VA with me, and they didn't ask me 1 or 2 questions, and if I denied it, that they just it would all be over. They got a pile of evidence, that pile like that, I was in that police station over 2.5 hours, and I've got the recording of that, because I actually have the recording inside my bag. Nice. And so they've denied that as well. He would ask me like 1 or 2 questions, and then it would all be over. So I said to that solicitor, because when you're going on a VA, you don't have to pay anybody who gets the government pay for VAs, voluntary attendance. So I asked him, when the decision not to charge my dad in 2017, and the lawyer, Sarah Nelson, CPS lawyer, says we can have a meeting for me to explain to you why we've said that we're not going to charge him. And at that time, Alex Wilson had written my dad a letter, who should have been on my side investigating me. I'd written a letter, and I've got that letter as well, and he said to Appleyard, we are not, underline not in capital letters, going to charge you. And my dad went and put that letter up at all lampposts in Denbydale, and stuck it onto pub windows, and he put at the bottom of it, Carol Higgins is now under investigation for harassment. So
your dad did? Your dad put that up?
No, that letter was from the police, but my dad, the bit that he put on the bottom,
right, sorry,
he made the font look like the police had written it though. So when I told the police what he'd done, because that's fraud, police wouldn't do anything about that either. So then I went, and Sarah Nelson said that you could have this meeting with her to find out why they'd come to that decision not to charge my dad. And then when I rang her up and said I want the meeting, you can't have the meeting, she's gone off sick indefinitely. So at CPS. Convenient. So then I got Mark Burns-Williams involved, Police and Crimes Commissioner, and I got him involved before then. I got my MP involved. None of their involvement made any difference, they still closed the door on my dad. So no support whatsoever from other parts of the establishment. And I'd written to 10 Downing Street and the Home Office. None of it worked. They still put the lid on me. So then when I finally did get a meeting with CPS, because I argued and made sure I got it, and my MP and Mark Burns-Williams said, well, why did you say she could have a meeting and now you're saying you can't? So eventually they got a meeting with Claire Walsh and Elizabeth Jenkins, and I took him with me And I asked him, will you come with me? And it turned out that he knew people at the bar. You know, they call the legal bar.
Right.
And he were talking to, like, the CPS lawyers. And I got this file, what I'd given the police, because I didn't believe the police were giving my evidence to CPS. And I'm saying, this is what they should have had. But they were saying, that's not what this meeting's about. It's not for you to give us your right to review now. This is just to discuss, you know, why you didn't get justice. Anyway, so I'd completed my right to review, and I'd give them all this. I'd showed them this, and plus that lawyer started talking to him about friends they knew, you know, just having some chit chat. So I felt it were more to do with not what you knew, it was to do with who you knew.
Yeah.
I felt like that were I think if I had took him with me to that meeting in Leeds, CPS chambers, I don't think, even though I'd showed them that file that I didn't believe the police were giving them, that the police had like passed all to the CPS, I don't think I would have got my day in court. Anyway, luckily they come back, the CPS, in 2018 and said, we've overturned the decision. We're gonna he's gonna be summoned to court, so they still never searched his house for his computer or his phone or all like that. And we're going to be, and so they summoned him to court. A year later, that's how long it took for it to go to court. A year later, in 2019, when I heard that it were going to go to court, I got a massive pain in my heart. So I've been fighting 35 years. Finally, they're saying they're going to take him to court. And as soon as I got that decision in Dewsbury Police Station, I got this pain in my heart, and it wouldn't go away for months and months and months. And I kept going to my doctors, and I was saying, there's something wrong with me. She's saying, Carol, it's stress. Don't worry. And then I says, well, how come I've carried stress in my body when, you know, all my life, but this feels completely different. And do you know what it was? It was that little girl inside me. Finally, she got what she wanted, but she didn't want that, really. She didn't want to be taking her dad to court. No. She didn't want for her dad to be sat there calling her a liar when he was saying to her when she was a little girl, I love you and I'm doing this to you because I love you and we can be married like man and wife and stuff. It's the feelings that go off, the confusion, even when you're getting just, you know, you're getting what you wanted for it to go to court, and the heartbreak, because that's what happens to victims of incest. I wish somebody on the street had done it to me, because at least I would have had my mum and dad to protect me. But when it's your mum and dad, I didn't have anybody to love me and protect me and help me through it.
Nobody.
So I got in 2019 on New Year's Eve, as the court case were in January in 2019. On New Year's Eve, I went in house by myself. And I put the Premier God channel on, and this woman says to me, there's a woman just tuned in and she's going to court in 2019. She's taken her dad for rape, for incest. She says, and she needs to know she's going to be all right. I was like, oh my God, thank you, Lord. Honestly, the Lord, I kept seeing loads of signs as well. And then,
what, that were just plucked out of, you obviously haven't got in touch, so you put that on and they said, we've got someone watching with this.
There's a woman just tuned in just now, and she's going to court in 2019. She's taking her dad to court for rape, for incest, and she needs to know she's going to be all right.
Jesus.
I was just looking at her and just knew that was for me. That woman for me.
That's mad.
There can't be many more that fit that description, so it worked for you, that, wasn't it? Jesus.
Yeah. And so then the court trial started in January.
So this is the trial that you've been waiting for. This is the moment where you finally get to take him down to court, to prison. Did
you think that when you finally got the trial and it were all happening, did you have confidence that you were gonna get him sent down, or did you think he's gonna worm his way out of this?
I didn't think for 1 minute confidently that he were going to get sent down, but I didn't think that he wouldn't either. I didn't know either way how it were going to go. And on the first day of the trial, I wasn't allowed in. So in 2015, they finally let me make another statement. So all the other times I kept saying, just let me make another statement, and they wouldn't allow me to. And so that statement was shown. It was a video statement. They'd edited it down to, I think, 2.5 hours or 2 hours, something like that. I couldn't be allowed in that court because that first day at trial, they're swearing the jury in. They've got to swear, 12 members of the jury, and then they've got to show the jury that video statement. I got to go in the day after, on the second day of the trial, and I sat outside the court all that day, and they kept saying to me, you don't have to be here, you can go in a little room downstairs, or when you come to court, you can sit in you can come through the back door and stuff. I'm not going through no back door. I'm going through that front door. Yeah. I'm sitting here. I'm not sitting in no little room. I'm not scared. They were saying I could have a screen or I could give, videos. I'm standing in front of him. Yeah. Nothing stopping me from standing in front of him. I don't fear him anymore. And so I got up and gave my evidence, and my barrister started asking me questions about the tattoo, where I came from, and just bits about my background and stuff like that. And he didn't really spend much time speaking to me. It was his defence that got up and started saying to me, I put it to you that he never did this to you, and he never abused you, and he didn't shoot the dog in front of you, and everything he were, he didn't rape me, he didn't lay me down on the front rug, he didn't have oral sex with me, he wasn't kissing me like a girlfriend, everything. And everything he was saying to me, I was saying, yes he did, yes he did, yes he did. And all the time I got to look at the jury while they were questioning me, and there were one member in the jury in the middle, this woman, and I remember looking at her thinking, there's something about you, I know you, I've never seen you before, but I know you. And she just stuck out from all the rest of them. And anyway, on the 7th day of the trial, my mum got up after me, my brother got up, the neighbour who it said, as if I'd brought you in yet, she got up, Ina witnessing the love bites on my neck, my friend from school, she got up to say that I'd told her when I was 15 that my dad was messing about with me. And her mum and dad had witnessed it as well. My cousin Deanna, she'd seen me coming downstairs all dishevelled, where he'd had me upstairs in his bedroom. Yeah. He used to come home from pub on a night time, and this is what I was telling, and he'd come in drunk and he'd come into my bedroom and he'd take my arm and take me down landing and take me into his bed and have sex with me. And this was happening nearly every day. So he kept saying to me, I put it to you that this didn't happen. And I was like, yes, it did. Yes, it did. And then all of a sudden on the 7th day, 2 officials ran into the courtroom and had a word with the judge and made everybody get out of the courtroom. And I was like, my heart was beating like mad. I thought, what's going on here? And I thought, this case can't get stopped now. Do you know? And
so close.
It was, yeah. And anyway, my barrister got me in a little room. He was amazing, my barrister, Peter Hampton. He prosecuted the Rotherham paedophile.
All right, yeah.
And he says to me, we've got 2 choices. We can stop the court case because somebody's been talking about your case, and a member of jury, they've been working in a hospital and they've told somebody at the hospital about the court case, and they've rang down and said, she's been talking about this court case, so we can either retrial it or we can continue with the trial with 11 members of the jury. He said, and me and the judges spoke about it, and we're going to let it continue. Thank God for that. Because the judge had said it's all or nothing, so it needed every single member of the jury to say not guilty. If one member said no, he wasn't guilty. But imagine, she would have been the one, because when I went back in the court, it were her. That same woman, that woman, who was standing out to me like that.
Thank God that she got removed.
When the judge did the summing up, and then said to the jury, go out and decide on your verdict.
Must have been a tense moment for you.
And it only took them an hour and a half in the lunch break. I thought we're going to be days or hours.
Because they can have as long as they want, can't they, to make the decision?
Yeah. And I thought it were going to be like that. And the Carol Higgins, back in court, I was dead surprised. Anyway, I got back in, and my dad stood in dock all the way through court case. He was sat like that all the way through court case, denying absolutely everything. And when he were being questioned, when judge were asking him something, or in defence, he were going around houses and taking ages. He reminded me like Vicky Pollard, yeah, but no, but. And I've got all trial transcripts, so all that's going in my book, you know, what he were coming out with. And he said that his defence was he couldn't have raped me because when he come back for the first time he raped me, well, when he'd been to America on a hunting trip in Appalachian Mountains with Jim Pipkin, who's got a plane. Yeah. And when he come back, he'd heard that I'd had a party at his house. And because we were staying at my auntie's house, and so we got a key cut, me and my brother, and we had a party. And then my mum, while he were away, come and took half the furniture out of the house because he wouldn't let her have half the furniture because she'd left him. So she broke into the house and took half the furniture as well. And we'd had this party, and he went mad, and he went round to the phone box to phone his girlfriend. So he got a girlfriend all the time he were at me. And he went round to the phone box to phone his girlfriend, and because he'd said to me, I'd seen my mum threatened to cut my mum up middle with a machete if you don't tell me who you've had this sex to dream about. My dad said to me when I went to the phone box, if you don't tell me what lads come to that party, there's going to be big trouble. And then that flashback of what he'd done to my mum, I was really frightened of him and all the times he'd been violent towards me as a child, so I cut my wrist. And then when he come back from round phone box, my brother tied something round it, dragged me round to the phone box. He come back round and he says, it's not too bad for you to go to hospital, but you're too mentally disturbed for you to sleep by yourself, so you've got to sleep with me tonight. And I thought, he's not angry with me anymore. And that was the first time he had sex with me, when I said to him, what would my granddad say? So imagine him waiting 35 years to get into court to actually tell him all this, and then his defence was saying, I put it to you, you're lying basically, he didn't do any of these things. So then my dad was stood in dock with guard dock, and apparently the man had come up with all these keys, and he was stood behind him because my dad, one of my friends, it were always full, you know, where people sit when you can watch your court gallery. It were always full. And my friends were watching him, and my dad knocked on her shoulder, went like this to say, who's that? And she went, I don't know, but he were already up there. And then the judge says, right, what's your verdict, to the jury? And the first one said, guilty. So I thought, right, they all had to say it. So I had to, all of them did say it, thank God. And
I hope that went quick for you, because you know that on bloody X Factor where it's like this, is just going guilty.
When you know that it's got to be every single one as well. And when he turned round and said, like, it's like putting that hammer down, you know, guilty, take him down. And they didn't bring him back up tomorrow for sentencing, so they didn't even, because I was scared of him with his guns.
They just got him out, just got him away.
Next day I went back for sentencing, and they put him away. They knocked him 2 years off. They give him 22 years. They knocked him a year off for his health and a year off for his age. But just think on, he were in his 30s when they were raping me. So they didn't have bad health then, did he? Or he were a young man. And now, because they've knocked them 2 years off, if he'd have got 22 years, he would have still had to serve that full amount. Because they've knocked him 2 years off, the way the law works, he's only got to serve half of it, so he's only got 10 years.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Jesus, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And now, somebody told me he were dead in prison, and it turns out he's not. But I rang my Ministry of Justice up to see like whether he is, you know, what somebody's told me this. She says, well, unless he's died this morning, she says, I'll find out for you, because they have to tell me.
Are you allowed to know all this kind of stuff?
And she says, when he's getting out, and she says, she rang me back and she says, Carol, she says, he's not dead. She says, unless he's died this morning, she says, because yesterday he was in the office with his solicitors. And like, he's in category C in Doncaster, and I've seen 2 prison wardens who work in that prison, and they've said that he's arrogant in there and he's calling all shots in there. Category C, it's one less from an open prison. Yeah. And look how brutal he is, and that gun crime, you know how he got, you know, he held a gun, but yet them women got booted out of court saying they weren't credible witnesses because of the ball tag, but yet the police would have been witnesses to see it because he come out and waved his flag, and they shut school down, And there's loads of things is being protected. And I've been told that he's got a little black book, and if anything happens to him, that little black book has to go somewhere, and it's a fella, one of its next copper, who's got that little black book.
It's basically
B.W.
Epstein.
Johnson.
It's like Epstein, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the connections that he's got.
So should he technically
protection.
be in a category
Oh,
A
and
prison?
I'll tell you what I've missed out as well. A letter came should have been delivered to his house in the 90s, and it went to a neighbour's by mistake. They've opened it. It had one of them Nazi signs on it. Ooh. And it says it was from a black Nazi cult paedophile ring from America. And since that happened, and they handed it into police, but nobody police, we don't know about that letter.
Never saw it.
No, never saw it. And since that day, the postman contacted me a few years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, and told me, did you know that your dad's was a postal drop-off point? So you know how postmen have bags and they have to walk around, but they can't carry them all, obviously. And so what they have post-off points where they drop them at somebody's house, and then when they've emptied the sack, they go back and pick that up and carry on. My dad's was a postal drop-off. So that means that my dad, to make sure it didn't happen that again, could go through everybody's post.
See, your dad's pulling strings in bloody Royal Mail. It's mental, isn't it?
Yeah.
If this all gets unearthed, I'm so eager to see how far it goes and how big it goes. And
I hope other victims, the only way it can go forward and be investigated is if other victims, police have told me this, and my MP's told me this, is if other victims of Pickles comes forward.
So, I mean, that's...
So far, are you the only recorded one successful to come forward? That's connected?
Yeah.
What's happening with him? Where is he now?
He's dead.
When did he die?
And Pickles' son, I've researched him. Pickles, if you do your research on Pickles, is connected to Hollywood.
Right.
You do research...
He goes to America, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all connected to Hollywood, Pickles, if you look at it. His daughter's an actress as well. And his relations, anybody can Google that and see his connections to Hollywood and the establishment. And... like you say, it's if anybody else is going to come forward and speak about it.
I think watching this podcast, if anybody obviously has gone through similar or same to you, you've just got to come forward, haven't you? Because...
But it's not just him, because who else was in that ring? And I think that's why the independent inquiry into child sex abuse, what's just closed now, they've closed it by saying that there's no establishment paedophile ring to be seen, or Westminster paedophile ring, when they already know that he was ringleader of a ring. Who else was in that ring? How many children have been abused and buried and raped?
I hadn't even got out to say, because it's just...
Shocking.
Why were he renting land off Chief Inspector Richard Ellis? Why Simon Walter Fraser? When you googled Simon Walter Fraser, his connections is with royal family.
Oh, God. What were it like when that hammer come down and guilty? What feet, you know, that tight chest, did it go?
Do you know what happened?
Yeah.
You know at car boot sale when he threatened to kill me, and he went, go away little girl, and he went, see ya, like that, when I walked away, and he'd already been told he weren't going to be charged, because that letter had gone round village, what he put up. When he got sent down, I didn't know how I was going to react, and the judge turned round and said, send him down, and I turned round and I went, see ya.
Buzzing. Well
Goes
done.
around, comes around, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's some karma, that, isn't it? Some long awaited karma, but
well overdue.
Yeah.
Well.
And then I come out and all the press were waiting for me, and people can see that. If you
I've
Google Carol Higgins, it's gone international, my story. People are doing case studies.
So
because
it should.
I think people should be understanding sexual violence from my case studies as well.
100%.
And I've been contacted from this national understanding sexual violence within governments coming together, and I should have done this podcast they wanted me to do, and then I got cancelled at last minute with that as well. So
keep fighting.
Yeah, people are stopping me. BBC, like I said,
trying to stop you.
They asked me, BBC, when I got justice, I says, right, do you want an update, because I'd already given an interview with them before, but I couldn't talk about the case, that I've won my case, and I gave it and they won't air it. ITV won't air it. So only time I'm getting any my voice is being heard is these podcasts.
Is when you're going not the traditional where there's a control and
mainstream media won't touch it.
That says everything. That says all it needs to say.
Everything you need to say.
Like my story's gone national saying I got justice and a 35-year fight for justice, but it's not gone into it, you know, with all the Judge Pickles stuff and that. And Judge Pickles, I've researched it. You can look at this. Judge Pickles' son has said if anybody tries to accuse my dad of paedophilia, and I've found this and researched it, I'll sue them for every penny they've got. But yeah, it's not me who's just saying it. It's my MP's office who said it, and it's that retired chief's officer who said it as well.
How can he not believe
that everybody knew, but nobody could touch him? Who was in that ring?
That's the question.
There's rings.
Where's the victims? Why were my dad protected for 35 years when there were enough evidence to arrest an army of paedophiles?
Yeah.
Because I'm paedophile.
If I'd kept banging all them years, banging my head up against that wall, he would still be walking free now to abuse other girls.
100%.
And like when it were going to court, I know a lady, she was married to a police officer, and she would come into Jim and saying, "Oh, my husband was in police force." Said, "Oh, it's all hotting up in police force now. Everybody's talking about Happily Hard case."
I think it's a good job you kept banging on that door, and just the first step into like eyes on incest and rape, and that's what you obviously want to highlight, and also getting justice for yourself, because that was. I'm dead happy for you.
Well, if I hadn't done it, if they've done this to me, this were one of the reasons, not just for me. If they've done this to me, how many other victims have they done it to?
Yeah.
How many other victims? And I'm hearing lots. And I think the cherry pick, and obviously all abuse is like, you know, dangerous, it's horrible, it's damaging, you know, the trauma that it puts people through. But the low picking fruit who hasn't got anything, so it looks like they've got statistics. But, you know, and people who are already going to say, you know, the guilty or something like that, but they're definitely covering up the establishment, because even you only have to look at internet to see that the reason the independent inquiry was set up was because of high profile paedophiles and victims coming forward. That's originally why it was set up, and now they're saying there's naught to see here.
Have you had people come forward to you? Have you had victims see?
I've had people come forward and say to me that they had their horse on farmers' land, because my dad always had farmers' shooting rights, and you want farmers, and I've had farmers come forward and say that they wasn't frightened of my dad, but my dad used to leave the gates open. He were a snitch, my dad, he were a police informer. Everybody knew he were a police informer. He were well known for it. And lots of people have come forward and told me that, and how violent he's been towards them, and how he's been violent with his gun crimes towards them. They know that he gets away with murder, that the police is police protected. Police that have come forward and told me that. Plus, this farmer, these girls have this horse on farmers' land, and the farmers like giving them cigarettes and alcohol. And this girl, she were having a bad time because she didn't get on with her stepdad and stuff like that. So it were an escape for her to go down, you know, to her horse. So the farmers knew, and they'd say to her, and I've heard other victims say this as well, say that if and school teachers have been at it. I've had people come forward with education. Girls have been abused in schools as well. Shelley High School, where I went to, and a farmer would say, if you don't give me a feel or have sex with me, I'm going to tell your mum and dad that you've been drinking and you won't be able to keep your horse on here and you'd have it took off you. And plus, there were a fishing syndicate on that land, so so they had a police fishing syndicate. So the police, West Yorkshire Police, Home Firth, Kirkburton, all them, they had this fishing pond in that area in Denbydale, and all fishing. So police used to go fishing on this pond, this farmer's land. And they used to say to this girl, if you don't give me a feel, well, you've give him a feel. Yeah. So police were sexually abusing the girls as well as school teachers, farmers.
All the people
and
you should
not,
be able to
and
trust.
calling and blaming the girls, calling them slags, police not listening to them, getting rid of the statements. And this one police lady told me that this girl went in and said she'd been raped and she were underage, and this officer got her in this room on her own and said, right, tell me all about what's happened to you like this. And she was telling her, and policemen were listening behind door laughing, and then they turned around and said, you're only saying it in case you're pregnant, so you're crying rape in case you're pregnant. The attitude towards young girls, and I still believe it's going on today, is you know...
Well, yeah, definitely.
ridiculous to say that nothing's been done about it, not enough's
It really
been done
is,
about it.
yeah.
Incest. And you can see, because like when we've just had lockdown, because that concerned me, because when we had lockdown, child abuse don't go into
Trapped at
lockdown.
home.
If I'd have been chat with my dad, it would have been 10 times worse.
Definitely.
Plus a lady come forward to me and said that her daughter works in Barnsley Housing and Wakefield Housing, and with lockdown there were more phone calls with incest, you know, and you think incest is when you're of age, you know, say, because don't class it as rape.
The law, yeah.
If you're of age, you know, with your cousin or your brother or your dad, you know, whatever. But I'm talking about child incest, and it carries a lesser charge than when I said, because on my dad's indictment there were 15 charges of internal rape, oral rape, masturbation, all these things he used to make me do to him.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if this is all happening to other children and they're getting the door closed on them, and social services aren't believing them, or schools not believing them, because there's so many people falling under the net, because when people are reporting it, statistics show that there's only 1% of rape cases ever get to court as well.
1%.
Because if you look in Daily Mail, they use my case as an example, saying when Priti Patel says shame on them for only 1% of rape cases actually getting to court. And then I think there's, say, out of 120,000 children reporting rape cases, 128,000, I think there were about, I don't know what the figures are now. I can't remember what the figures are now, but I have got some figures down here to show you that. And what they're saying as well with the independent inquiry into child sex abuse, they've made like I think about 18 recommendations, or so many recommendations, and but they are only recommendations. They're not saying whether they're going to be implemented or not. So this is why I'm speaking out as well, because I want to make sure that them recommendations turn into action.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust them, that, you know, they've not done it all these years, knowing that there's this amount of rapes being reported. They call it the toxic 3. A toxic 3 is domestic violence, drug abuse and alcohol dependency. Alcohol abuse, that's when what kids are seeing in the home, but incest isn't on that list either. What services are available for children to report to if it is happening to them? But this is what I'm trying to get at, is it is estimated that one child rings Childline every 25 seconds, up to 3,000 per week, and approximately 74% of these calls get referred to or onto agencies like social services and police. But the amount of cases that are going underneath the radar as well, that are not getting reported, that's why there's lots of homeless people, you know, kids on the streets who are not being seen to. Camilla Batman-Gellish, she opened a children's charity, and the government spent £9 billion on shutting her down. Billion, saying that she'd been pinching money, not spend from a charity, and it went to court, and the judge awarded the case for her. The judge actually said to her, Justice Falk, she said that she wished that there were more people like her, because she were helping the underground kids that have fallen through the net, thousands and thousands of them, and she was saying, I wish more people were like that. So even though she won a court case from the government spending $9 million to discredit her, saying she was taking charity money, they even still shut her charities down, and now she's got to take a judicial review out on them. That's what she's doing at the moment. So where's all them children going who she were helping at that time? But the reason I think they've shut her down is because their children from the underground, abused children, are coming out and telling them that they're high profile coppers, you know, and paedophiles that are actually raping them. And when Maggie Oliver, she whistleblew on the Rochdale case, when she told that they made the drama 3 girls, didn't they? Yeah. She told one of the girls to go around and in the car with her and point out the cars that they were trafficking them, you know, to different places. And she was told to do. She pointed one out, and so Maggie did a rang up, do a search on this number plate, and it actually belonged to a police officer.
Fucking hell.
It just goes round and round and round, and where does it stop?
So the black grooming gangs, what they call grooming gangs, Asian, for me, they're using that as a cover-up
to steer the light away from the white grooming gangs.
Yeah, from the white grooming gang. Well, when I went on the Say Something course, and they told me predominantly in England, the rapists are white because we're a predominantly white country. So there's going to be a lot more with, you know. So, but yeah, it's only the Asian ones that are ever. Yeah.
Well, that's to me. You know what I know at news. You always think of this ring. Apart from the Savile and the Epstein stuff, it's always the Asian ones.
Alone. Savile never worked alone.
No chance.
Part of Monday Club and stuff like that. I believe Judge Pickles were part of the Savile one, the Cyril Smith and Mountbatten, Royals, Andrew. Look at pictures of Prince Charles with Jimmy Savile. My dad used to make us watch Jimmy Savile, Jim will fix it for you, and stand up and sing God Save the Queen. When it come on, my dad, royalist. But if children are being abused, I urge you to come forward and to report it. I'm asking you to report it to places that have not that failed me. So that's an hard thing to do, really. Yeah. I'm saying, you know, speak out and say something. Report it to the police. Report it to social services. You know, report it to your teachers. But all these people failed me. But they're saying that things have changed now. They're not the same. Let's hope.
Just keep talking. Keep at it.
Yeah, and it's saying, you know, when it says on here, you know, tell somebody you trust. What if it's, you know, your mummy and daddy? I did tell somebody who I thought I could trust. It's this establishment that's the cover up as well, because I think a lot of them. Well, I'm still hearing now, you know, that the system is still failing, and it's still, you know, and the independent inquiry shows that there's serious systematic failings throughout the UK, and UK is one of the richest countries, and yet I think it's on 18th on the list of countries that fails to protect victims of rape and incest.
Something needs to change, doesn't it?
But do you ever hear victims' voices being heard?
Not really. No. Yeah, I think you're right. You see this kind of stuff.
But you know, you know Camilla Batman-Gellish, she's brought a book out called Mind the Child, and survivors, I forgot what they call it, and they're the children's testimonies of what's happened to them. And she speaks about how the children were saying they're high-profile people who were abusing them. And this is why I think they've shut her down.
All right, okay.
It's got to be, hasn't it? It's
got to be. If she's been cleared, her name's been cleared that she's not done anything wrong, she's been running this charity, of course.
She's done something right, and they don't like it, do they?
No, because they know she's catching the ones that aren't with the NSPCC, and they're government-run charities. The government-run charities, for me, are protecting, and the establishment.
It's just no matter where you look, there keeps getting more and more connections and wires crossing, and it's daft, isn't it? But, well, I don't know what.
Why aren't the MPs answering back? You know, why are they all ignoring my emails when I've gone on it while the fight, you know, strike while the iron's hot. When
they're asking for voices, aren't they?
They're asking for voices not to be, you know, ignored, but yet they're
ignoring the voices.
Pick and choose what voices they want to hear and what message. It's all propaganda and all. It's.
But yet, when I spoke about it at the Independent Inquiry, the Truth Project, I've had to sign a disclosure that I can't show anybody. I've got a recording of that meeting, and I'm not allowed to. I'm legally bound, silence, not to.
You've been legally silenced.
Yeah, being legally silenced.
Again, that says all it needs to say, doesn't it? Just when you know them facts. Carol, I don't want to end it on. That's been a lot, and there's a lot to consume, and there's a lot for people, hopefully, if they've watched and listened to this, to do their own research and educate themselves. You've only scratched the surface, and obviously you've got a lot more story to tell. We've had a lot of time. I can't let you go without. You've brought your books. You've mentioned them briefly, but obviously Kilimanjaro, that's clearly been a pivotal point in your life. I'd just like you to, Kilimanjaro, how was it? What's that done for you? It's clearly led you to where you are today. It's brought on, to me, it sounds like, it's been a it's been a route of getting that, you know, your dad away. So how was it? And
Climbing Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
Well, I've done 2 skydives at 13,500 feet.
and how were them? Because that's my dream.
That is my dream.
And that was for charity. So what I'm saying is, I know I've been a youth worker and they've said, oh, miss, you must have a lot of money to be able to do all the things that you've done. I've said, no, if you do it for charity, it's a win-win situation.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I did it for the Bluebell Hospice.
Yep.
And I did that for the Lily Millie Foundation, and I've done other fundraising events. I did the Barnsley Witch. I was an actress once, and that helped me overcome my fears and build my confidence about publicly speaking and things like that. Going to college, I left school, so I went into adult education. I went to Northern College and learnt how to punctuate with confidence, speak and present with confidence, and went on little miniature courses and things like that. So all the things that have helped build my character. So I wasn't that shy little girl who was afraid to speak out and say anything. And of course, obviously, I've been called pathetic and shut up for a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that other people will go out and make their dreams come true, and and climb their mountains and experience what it's like for themselves to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. It's actually called the Mountain of Greatness.
Is it?
Yeah, and the mountain is forever changing. So I always wanted to go through a jungle to experience what it'd be like living in a jungle. So, and you could kept hearing and all these monkey noises and stuff like that, and you're walking through it and you're like, this is surreal.
This exists.
This exists.
You think it's fake, don't you? But this exists.
Yeah. And then as you start climbing higher up the mountain, it starts to get barren. So the large trees, tall trees, turn into bushes. Oh yeah, so it got as you got further up the mountain, because there's less oxygen.
Yeah.
The trees can't grow as big, so you get like large bushes, and then beautiful flowers, and then as you get even higher, I was starting to get pins and needles in my hands, in my fingers, and I was starting to feel dizzy and feeling sick and things like that. I'm feeling tired, and then to make sure that I didn't have to be dragged down the mountains, because what they were doing was, we could see people being frog marched down the mountains. So every day when that were happening, I was thinking, please God, don't let that be me.
Is that those who can't continue?
Yeah, who have to be brought down. So even you'll see people like footballers and really fit and healthy, and you think they're easy going to make it, but they wasn't making it.
Wow.
So when I was getting these fatigues and like pins and needles and stuff, I was making sure that I ate properly. I ate all the cooked food, and that I was sleeping well. And then it got to a point with the altitude sickness, I couldn't sleep at all, and I had to have I think they call it Diamax. That's a tablet.
Altitude sickness tablet.
Altitude sickness tablet. Yeah. At some point, I had to have that, and just seeing one side of the mountain, and it was full of snow and hailstone, and luckily I took an umbrella with me, so one of the guides, Nelson, called me Umbrella Girl and said I was smart, because when I was like this, with wind and rain,
Umbrella per mountain,
and everybody
that's
else
hilarious.
was like stuff, getting battered with what they call it, hailstone as big as peas and things like that. And then you'd climb up one side, you'd have an 8-hour climb one day, and you'd come to a place called Barranco Wall, so you were literally climbing up the face of it, which were really hard. You can see my video diary of it on my YouTube channel. I did a video diary.
That's amazing,
well.
yeah.
Plus also in my book, I've got QR codes, so you can actually see me on the mountain.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's a good idea, I like that.
I've never seen that before.
It's an interacting book.
Yeah.
And then when you got to the north side of the mountain, we're coming down the other side, because you actually have to go up to come back down to go up again. That's all part of
to acclimatising,
yeah. So then we'd come down the other side, and there'd be all palm trees and lovely waterfalls and things like that. And there's pictures of that in my book. And then getting into base camp, I didn't have a proper mat. I only had like a tiny little Baden-Powell old scouts mat, you know, probably what somebody had used like 30 years ago. And I shared a tent with a lady called Ying Ying, and she had a space age mat, space age like kind of mat, you know, rolled up. So it were like nice and soft and stuff like that, like all little bumps in it and stuff, like comfy. And so I'd make sure I got into camp first, and I'd put my hands across the bottom of the mountain and make sure that I got the least bumpy side, you know, bumpy side. And then there were all these little techniques to try and make it as you know, conquerable as possible. And then on summit night, we had to set off at 12 o'clock midnight. And when I set off at midnight, it were pitch black, and I'll never forget this red crescent moon. And compared to how the weather had been, most of days it had been raining, snowing, or hailstone, we actually had a clear night on summit night.
Wow.
And this beautiful red crescent moon. And when I looked up and walked up, it were like a stairways to heaven. Felt like stairways to heaven. And when I looked down, my belly like left, you know, it was lunging. It were like, and then we set off. We had to have every hour we had 3-minute breaks, and every time we stopped for them 3-minute breaks, freeze were coming up my fingers and my feet, and I said to my guide, one of the guides, I can't keep stopping because oh gosh, my phones keep going off. Can you hear that on interview?
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. So I said I can't keep stopping because I'm never going to get started again. And people were throwing up, and they were losing the balance, and there was some of them were crying, saying I can't go on anymore. So luckily, Wise Thomas got King Charles from the back of the queue, and he brought him to the front, and he went, get this girl up this mountain now. And I went off on my
VIP.
own, just me on my own, and left them behind. So I was first to reach the summit.
Wow.
At what time was it? So we were climbing, and I saw the sun come up. Oh my word, when you saw that sunshine.
That's unbelievable.
What a view.
Oh, well, yeah, I've got that picture.
Can you see to the bottom? That sounds daft. Can you see that?
No.
Or is it just like...
No. No, I've done a few mountains. I've done Ben Nevis, I've done Scarfolf Pike, I've done Snowdon, I've done... I ski as well, so I've you know, been off skiing.
Your fair share.
Yeah, I've done my fair share of seeing some mountains.
Seasoned.
But you know, it's the biggest freestanding mountain in the world, isn't it?
It's a volcano, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a volcano. So when I got to the top, I looked into the chasm. It wasn't as deep as I thought it was going to be.
Oh wow! Because if it's a volcano, the top's not a rock, is it? It'll be in. That's right.
I thought it would look down into it, and you'd see, you know, like
lava.
Yeah, probably I did actually.
I would.
But it was only like a little dip like that. But I think there's 3 volcanoes on Mount Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
And then there were, you could see what they call them, ice. Glaciers. Yeah. That were. I've got some lovely photos of them in my book, and I stood on the summit. I think it was 12 o'clock we set off, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning I stood on the summit.
Wow, what a trek.
10 o'clock in the morning I stood on the summit, yeah.
What an experience. I'm tired just thinking about that.
Is that the best?
Oh no, it wasn't 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, 10:15. I actually got down into base camp at 10:15.
15 minutes, not bad that.
So what happened was I got there because I'd left the group, so I was the first up, and I think I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I can't even remember. And I stood on the summit, and this is on my video, and I shout, "Peace to the world! I am a champion!" And I was jumping up and down because first I thought I was going to die of bowel cancer, And then second, I thought I could die of altitude sickness because I have a friend whose sisters climbed that mountain and she died of altitude sickness on that mountain. And that mountain does take people's lives.
Yeah.
That's why they have to bring them down that quick. And then because I ski, we come down the other side of the mountain and it were different completely again. It were all shaly where it hadn't been shaly before. It had been like tropical, it had been snowy and rocky, so it were all shaly. And I were kind of skiing down it.
Yeah.
With my walking boots on and my poles, because like Wise Thomas, King Charles kept looking at me and saying, I ain't never seen aught like this before. So I got back into camp at 10 o'clock in the morning, and that the base camp where we'd left from, and then everybody else got back in about 1 o'clock, so I'd got...
Well, you sprinted up and down, didn't you?
And that was 9 month after.
That's amazing,
8 months after 9 hours of bowel cancer. So it's all about mental strength. And you talk about how I've got my dad. That's been the biggest mountain I've ever had to climb, a fight for justice.
Yeah.
But if, just never give up. Always keep that positive mindset. Believe, when you make them dreams, that's why I say in my cards say, and I sign my books, if you dream it and believe it, you can achieve it. I mean, and imagine me actually finding that key, that magical key inside that I've unlocked, being able to unlock all that. And even after all the trauma that I've experienced in my life, because I've had great support as well. And, people need to know that it's a lonely place. Cancer's a lonely place to be when you're suffering from that. Really, you're trying to be brave all the time. Child sex abuse, it's a lonely place to be, and and so always try and find positive things to chase away the negative.
Wow,
what a lovely way to end.
That's perfect. Well, you've definitely conquered the impossible, and I think you're still conquering the impossible. But Carol, that's a fantastic story. I don't think we need to say any more on that.
Just a true inspiration, honestly.
Thank you for your time. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed ourselves. I hope you have too. We'll overlay the images. Obviously, we'll sort this out after. We'll overlay the images at relevant points. We'll put links to your books. Check that out, and obviously the ones that's coming up. But you've got other stuff going on that we haven't had a chance to mention. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, well,
I appreciate you interviewing me and giving me this platform to speak my truth.
Yeah.
And that's all I ever want, to be able to speak the truth and for other people to be able to, because the truth will set you free.